Hey there, tonight we're diving into the resilient leadership of Winston Churchill, where the truth is that his unwavering resolve often stood on the precipice of uncertainty and doubt. If these stories help you unwind, I'd love a quick like or subscribe, but only if they're genuinely working for you. I'm curious where in the world you're listening from, so drop your location and local time in the comments. It's amazing seeing our little community span the globe through these historical tales. Now make yourself cozy, maybe adjust your room temperature or get that cup of tea, and let's explore tonight's tale together. Winston Churchill's early life was as colorful as one of his legendary cigars, full of unexpected twists and more than a few sparks. Here's a guy who was born in 1874 into the aristocratic Spencer Churchill family. But let's not pretend his childhood was all afternoon teas and cricket. No, young Winston was more interested in precarious adventures than polite society, and his school years shone with the brilliance of a damp squib. Churchill attended Harrow School, where he managed to rank at the bottom of his class. Consistently, he was the kind of student who left his teachers tearing their hair out, and not because he was challenging them with deep philosophical questions. In fact, his report cards read like a series of unfortunate events, with comments like very naughty and constant trouble to everybody. Harrow wasn't exactly impressed by his penchant for mischief, and the only thing he excelled at was English, which probably explains his future talent for stirring speeches. Despite his academic misadventures, Churchill had a knack for making a grand entrance. Take his first military escapade to Cuba in 1895. Fresh out of Sandhurst, where he graduated 20th out of 130, not exactly top of the class, but hey, improvement. He went to observe the Spanish fight insurgents. Churchill, just 21, was more fascinated by the local cigars than the local politics. He took to them like a duck to water, and they became a lifelong companion. He even got shot at during a train ride, but instead of ducking for cover, he seemed to relish the danger. This was classic Churchill flirt with peril, but always with style. Next stop, India. You might think this was a chance for Churchill to hone his military skills, but he was more interested in the polo fields than battlefields. This might sound trivial until you realize that polo was the sport of officers, and Churchill played it like his political career depended on it. In a way, it did. Polo was where he networked with the military elite, and perhaps more importantly, where he realized the power of spectacle. He wasn't just playing a game, he was building a brand. By 1898, Churchill was a war correspondent in Sudan because why not? His dispatches for the Morning Post were as flamboyant as his wardrobe, which was saying something. He participated in the last great cavalry charge at the Battle of Omdurman, an event that was as much about guts as it was about glory. Picture Churchill charging with the 21st Lancers, saber in hand, while bullets whizzed past. He later wrote about it with the kind of dramatic flair that would put Hollywood blockbusters to shame. But here's the kicker. Churchill was actually more interested in the political implications than the military ones. His writing wasn't just a recounting of events. It was a critique of British imperial policy. He questioned the morality of using machine guns against poorly armed tribesmen, a stance that didn't exactly win him friends in certain circles. Yet, it was this blend of bravado and brains that set him apart. Now, let's talk about his near-death experiences, and there were plenty. In South Africa, as a war correspondent yet again, he was captured by the Boers. Did he panic? Nah, he escaped from a prison camp, traveling nearly 300 miles to freedom. Just another Tuesday for Churchill. His escape was front-page news back in Britain, turning him into a national hero overnight. It's like he had a direct line to Lady Luck, and he knew how to work the publicity machine before social media made it easy. These early adventures were more than just a prelude to his political career. They were a crucible, shaping the defiant, audacious leader he would become. Churchill didn't just survive danger, he thrived in it, like a phoenix rising from the ashes, or perhaps more aptly, a bulldog charging headfirst into the fray. His experiences abroad armed him with a worldview that was as expansive as his waistline would later become. In short, young Winston was a cocktail of contradictions, a rebel with a cause that even he hadn't fully defined yet. But whether he was charging into battle or writing scathing critiques, one thing was clear. Churchill was never going to be a footnote in history. He was riding his own headline, one cigar-punctuated line at a time. So, after cultivating a flair for drama and dodging bullets like a real-life action hero, Churchill turned his focus to politics, a world no less dangerous than the battlefields he had galloped across. It was 1900 when he first dipped his toes into the political waters, snagging a seat as a Conservative MP for Oldham. Now, if you think Churchill was going to toe any party line, let me stop you right there. He was more of a political maverick, and party loyalty was about as important to him as a diet was to a chocoholic. Fast forward to 1904. Churchill, ever the iconoclast, decided the Conservative Party wasn't his scene. He jumped ship to the Liberals, like a rock star switching bands for artistic freedom. The move was as controversial as it was bold. Picture the political equivalent of a mic drop, and you're not far off. He'd grown disillusioned with the Conservatives' resistance to social reform and free trade, two issues that he, in true Churchill fashion, felt passionately about. He was all for shaking things up, even if that meant rattling a few cages. He wasn't just changing parties, he was changing the game. By 1908, Churchill had climbed the political ladder to become president of the Board of Trade. His tenure was marked by a push for progressive social policies, including the Trade Boards Act, which set minimum wages in certain industries. Sounds pretty modern, right? But not everyone was a fan. Critics saw him as a radical, a troublemaker, terms he probably wore like badges of honor. Yet, it was this kind of thinking that laid the groundwork for the modern welfare state. His stint as Home Secretary further proved he wasn't one to shy away from controversial decisions, like deploying the military to quell strikes. Let's just say his knack for making enemies was in top form. And then, drum roll, please, came the role of First Lord of the Admiralty in 1911. Churchill was in his element, diving into naval affairs with the enthusiasm of a kid at a candy store. He championed the modernization of the Royal Navy, pushing for more submarines and dreadnoughts. But as with any Churchill endeavor, it wasn't all smooth sailing. Enter Gallipoli. Gallipoli, the military fiasco of 1915 that haunts history books like a bad penny. Churchill's brainchild was a bold plan to knock the Ottoman Empire out of the war, but it ended up being a tragic quagmire. The cost was staggering. Over 130,000 Allied casualties, many of them from Australia and New Zealand, and let's not forget the financial cost, which was astronomical. Gallipoli was a black mark on Churchill's record, and it sent his political career into a nosedive. Like an unwelcome encore, he was forced to resign from the Admiralty. It was a public humiliation of epic proportions. One might think this would have crushed him, but we're talking about a man who seemed to thrive on adversity. If anything, it was an opportunity for reinvention. He joined the army, because why not? He served on the Western Front in 1960, leading a battalion in the trenches of France. It was a stark contrast to the high seas, but it showed his resilience, and maybe a touch of masochism. By the time he returned to the political scene in 1917, Churchill was like a cat with 9 lives. He was appointed Minister of Munitions, overseeing wartime production. His ability to bounce back was nothing short of remarkable, a testament to his sheer force of will and undeniable charisma. His political journey was a roller coaster, sure, but it was also a masterclass in perseverance. Even as he weathered the storms of criticism and controversy, he remained a larger-than-life figure, a paradox of charm and obstinacy. Churchill's pre-World War Roman 2 years were a whirlwind of political shifts that would leave even the most dedicated political junkie dizzy. He rejoined the Conservatives in 1924, as if returning to an old flame. His time as Chancellor of the Exchequer saw him return Britain to the gold standard, a move that was as contentious as it was economically questionable. Critics pounced, blaming him for worsening the economic slump. But if there's one thing Churchill excelled at, it was weathering criticism with a stiff upper lip and a witty retort. As the 1930s rolled in, Churchill found himself increasingly on the fringes of political life. His warnings about the rising threat of Nazi Germany fell on deaf ears. Many considered him a relic from a bygone era, a political dinosaur railing against change. But this was Churchill, and like any good underdog story, he was never truly down for the count. His ability to turn political wilderness years into a platform for his next act speaks volumes about his character. In the end, Churchill's pre-war career was a patchwork of triumphs and tribulations, a testament to his complexity as a leader. He was a man who, despite his flaws and failures, embodied resilience in the face of adversity. His story, still unfolding, was one of intrigue and audacity, punctuated by moments of brilliance and blunder. As we pause on the brink of his wartime leadership, it's clear that Churchill's saga is far from over. Stay tuned, because the best, or perhaps the most dramatic, is yet to come. As the curtain rose on the most dramatic act of Winston Churchill's life, it was 1940, and Europe was a powder keg with a short fuse. Churchill, the political maverick who had once been dismissed as washed up and out of touch, was about to take center stage. He became Prime Minister on May 10, 1940, the same day Hitler launched his blitzkrieg on France. Talk about timing. Churchill didn't just walk into the spotlight. He was catapulted there by the chaos of war. Now, let's address the elephant, or should I say bulldog, in the room. Churchill's leadership style, often described as bulldog spirit, conjures images of an unyielding, jowly figure growling his way through adversity. But like all great myths, there's more to it. Churchill was indeed tenacious, but his leadership was as much about his oratory prowess as his iron will. His speeches were masterclasses in morale boosting, blending stark realism with an unwavering call to arms. Take his famous "We Shall Fight on the Beaches" speech, delivered to the House of Commons on June 4, 1940. It was a verbal rallying cry that resonated far beyond the walls of Westminster, painting a picture of British defiance in the face of seemingly insurmountable odds. But here's the thing. Churchill didn't just rely on grandiose rhetoric. He had a knack for using humor and wit to keep spirits high, even when the situation was dire. His quips were legendary, often serving as both a balm and a battle cry. During the Blitz, when London was under relentless bombing, he remarked, "We are all worms, but I do believe that I am a glowworm." It's the kind of gallows humor that acknowledges the grim reality while offering a glimmer of hope. Yet, behind the scenes, Churchill's strategic decisions were a mixed bag. He was a master at rallying the nation, but not every plan was a stroke of genius. Take Operation Catapult, for instance. In July 1940, with France fallen and its navy at risk of falling into German hands, Churchill ordered the destruction of the French fleet at Mers-el-Kabir. Over 200 French sailors lost their lives. It was a brutal decision, born out of fear that those ships could be turned against Britain. The move soured relations with France, but it underscored Churchill's willingness to make hard choices for the greater good, or at least what he perceived it to be. Of course, not all of Churchill's gambles paid off. The Norway campaign of 1940 was a fiasco that nearly torpedoed his fledgling premiership. Intended to thwart German access to Swedish iron ore, the operation was plagued by poor planning and execution. It ended in disaster, with significant British losses. But Churchill, ever the political Houdini, managed to emerge relatively unscathed, largely thanks to his ability to persuade Parliament and the public that he was the man for the job. On the home front, Churchill's impact on public morale was profound. His speeches weren't just stirring, they were strategic, meant to fortify a nation under siege. He understood that keeping the British people resilient was as crucial as any military strategy. His visits to bombed-out areas of London, his willingness to mingle with ordinary citizens, and his iconic V for Victory sign all contributed to a sense of shared purpose. It was PR genius at a time when the term hadn't even been coined. Yet, let's not overlook the economic burden of war. The financial strain on Britain was colossal. By 1941, the country was essentially broke, relying heavily on American aid through the Lend-Lease program to keep the war machine running. Churchill's charm offensive in the United States was crucial here. He understood the importance of securing American support, and his close rapport with President Franklin D. Roosevelt was pivotal. It was a delicate dance of diplomacy, one that required Churchill to be both bulldog and diplomat, no small feat. As the war raged on, Churchill's strategic vision was both praised and criticized. His advocacy for the North African campaign in 1942, against considerable opposition, eventually paid dividends. The victory at El Alamein was a turning point, hailed by Churchill himself as not the end, not even the beginning of the end, but perhaps the end of the beginning. It was classic Churchill, a blend of realism and optimism, wrapped in a memorable soundbite. But for every strategic success, there were missteps that haunted him. The bombing of Dresden in February 1945 stands out as one of the most controversial decisions of the war. Intended to break German morale, the bombing resulted in a firestorm that killed tens of thousands of civilians. The ethical implications of such tactics were, and remain, deeply contentious. Churchill's wartime leadership was a study in contradictions. He was a visionary, yet sometimes blinded by his own convictions. His speeches inspired millions, but his decisions carried heavy costs, both human and financial. And while the myth of the bulldog spirit paints him as an indomitable force, the reality was more nuanced. Churchill was a man burdened by the weight of leadership, acutely aware of the stakes, but willing to shoulder the responsibility. As the war drew to a close, Churchill's legacy was already being written. He had navigated one of history's most perilous periods with a blend of grit, charisma, and sheer willpower. But the story of Churchill's wartime leadership is far from over. It's a tale of triumphs shadowed by tragedies, of a leader who, despite his flaws, became an emblem of resilience. Stay tuned, because the post-war chapter promises just as much drama and intrigue as the one we've just explored. With the war now in the rearview mirror, Winston Churchill found himself in a new kind of battlefield, a political one, where the ammunition was public opinion and the stakes were his career. In July 1945, just months after standing victorious with the Allies, Churchill faced an electoral defeat that was as shocking as it was humbling. Britain, exhausted by years of conflict, voted overwhelmingly for the Labour Party, ushering in Clement Attlee and a wave of social reform. It was a reality check for Churchill, a reminder that wartime heroics don't always translate into peacetime popularity. You see, the British public was ready for change, real, tangible change. The country was battered, economically and physically. The war had left the nation with a gargantuan debt, around £21 billion, about £900 billion today, and a population yearning for a welfare state that promised security from the cradle to the grave. Churchill, with his aristocratic roots and singular focus on victory, wasn't quite the poster boy for this new era of social democracy. Now, here's where we bust a myth. Churchill's so-called retirement wasn't the quiet, reflective exile some might imagine. Far from retreating to a life of tending roses and reminiscing, he remained a dominant voice in the political landscape, serving as leader of the opposition. And let's not forget his penchant for painting, which he pursued with the vigor of a man who knew that art, unlike politics, didn't shoot back. In 1946, Churchill delivered one of his most famous speeches at Westminster College in Fulton, Missouri, a small town that probably hadn't seen such excitement since the last county fair. It was here that he coined the phrase Iron Curtain to describe the growing divide between Western democracies and the Soviet-controlled Eastern Bloc. From Stettin in the Baltic to Trieste in the Adriatic, an Iron Curtain has descended across the continent, he declared, with the gravity of a prophet warning of storms on the horizon. It was a line that captured the imagination and anxiety of a world teetering on the brink of the Cold War. Churchill's speech was more than just a historical soundbite. It was a strategic move to wake the West from its post-war stupor. He saw the Soviet threat as a new kind of battle, one that required vigilance and unity among former wartime allies. It's easy to romanticize this as a moment of foresight, but let's not forget the context. Churchill was also trying to bolster his own political relevance and reassert Britain's place on the global stage. The Cold War wasn't just a geopolitical chess game. It was a chance for Churchill to play the elder statesman, a role he relished with all the gusto of a Shakespearean actor. By the 1950s, Britain was undergoing significant changes, socially, economically, and politically. The welfare state was expanding, national industries were being established, and the empire was starting to shrink like a wool sweater in a hot wash. Amidst this backdrop, Churchill made a political comeback that would make even a soap opera writer raise an eyebrow. In 1951, he returned as Prime Minister at the ripe old age of 76, a turn of events that seemed almost as improbable as his own resilience. This second stint was less about dramatic wartime leadership and more about steadying the ship in a rapidly changing world. Yet, Churchill wasn't exactly a man to rest on his laurels. He championed the development of nuclear weapons, ensuring Britain maintained its status as a global power, albeit a financially strained one. Churchill understood that in the atomic age, clout came with a mushroom cloud, even if the economic burden was akin to carrying an elephant on a tightrope. Despite the gravitas of his role, Churchill never lost his flair for the dramatic or his penchant for the quip. His wit remained as sharp as a tailor's needle, whether he was navigating the corridors of power or the more personal trials of aging. "I am ready to meet my maker," he famously quipped, "but whether my maker is prepared for the ordeal of meeting me is another matter." It's the kind of line that could make even the most jaded historian crack a smile, revealing the enduring charm that made Churchill both a formidable leader and a relatable human being. Churchill's later years were a tapestry of public service and private reflection. He received the Nobel Prize in Literature in 1953, a nod to his prodigious writing and oratory skills, not to mention a testament to his ability to spin a yarn with the best of them. His historical works, particularly his 6-volume series on World War II, became bestsellers, cementing his place not just as a leader, but as a chronicler of his own legacy. Yet behind the scenes, the physical toll of years spent waging wars, both literal and political, was undeniable. Churchill suffered a series of strokes, the first in 1949 and more severely in 1953, which he kept largely under wraps. But even as his body began to falter, his mind remained a bastion of wit and wisdom, much like an ancient fortress weathering the inexorable march of time. In 1955, Churchill finally stepped down as Prime Minister, but not without leaving an indelible mark on British politics. His departure was less a retreat and more a transition to the role of elder statesman, a living monument to a bygone era. He spent his final years at Chartwell, his beloved country home, where he indulged in painting and the company of family and friends. His canvases, often depicting tranquil landscapes, offered a glimpse into a softer side of a man more often associated with bulldogs and bombast. Churchill's twilight years were a study in contrasts. A man who had once stood at the pinnacle of power now found solace in the simple pleasures of art and nature. Yet he never truly faded from public consciousness. He remained a symbol of resilience, a figure whose legacy was as complex and multifaceted as the man himself. As he once remarked, "History will be kind to me, for I intend to write it." And write it he did, with a flourish that continues to captivate and confound those who seek to understand the enigma of Winston Churchill. So, while the curtain may have fallen on his political career, the story of Churchill's impact on the world stage is far from over. His legacy, like a fine wine or a particularly stubborn weed, endures. And as we prepare to delve into the final chapter of his remarkable life, it's clear that the man who once declared, "Success is not final, failure is not fatal. It is the courage to continue that counts," left a blueprint for resilience that resonates to this day. Stay tuned, because the concluding act promises to be as compelling as the saga that preceded it. Churchill, the indefatigable icon, left a legacy that shines brighter than a full moon on a cloudless night. Yet, like any good drama, his story is riddled with contradictions and complexities. The man who once said, "I have nothing to offer but blood, toil, tears, and sweat," also made decisions that cost lives and stirred controversy. To untangle the myth from the man, we need to sift through the layers of legend that have settled like dust on an old bookshelf. First, let's address the myth of Churchill as the unblemished war hero. Sure, his leadership during World War II was nothing short of legendary, but let's not gloss over his penchant for risky gambles. Take the Gallipoli campaign as a case study in audacious strategy gone awry. It was a venture that could fill a book with its failures. Oh wait, it has, costing over 130,000 Allied casualties. Despite this, Churchill's ability to bounce back from such setbacks was nothing short of Herculean. It's like the man had his own built-in PR machine, spinning failures into stepping stones. Then there's the narrative of Churchill as the champion of freedom. It's a romantic image, and not entirely inaccurate, but it's also worth noting that his views on empire and race were as outdated as a rotary phone. His resistance to Indian independence and his views on colonialism were less than progressive, to put it mildly. Yet, it's this juxtaposition that makes his legacy so compelling. He was a product of his time, a man whose brilliance often shone through the fog of outdated ideals. Economically, Churchill's decisions were as polarizing as a debate on pineapple on pizza. His return to the gold standard in 1925 was a financial faux pas that deepened Britain's economic woes. It was the fiscal equivalent of trying to swim with a lead weight. Yet, his wartime economic strategies were more successful, leveraging American support through the Lend-Lease Act to keep Britain afloat. It was a masterclass in transatlantic diplomacy, showcasing his ability to charm and cajole with the best of them. Politically, Churchill was a shapeshifter, switching parties with the agility of a cat on a hot tin roof. His political journey was a testament to his unyielding belief in his own vision, regardless of party lines. He was the ultimate political maverick, a man who danced to his own tune even if it occasionally sounded like a one-man band gone awry. This flexibility, or opportunism, depending on your perspective, allowed him to navigate the treacherous waters of political life with a deftness that was both enviable and exasperating. And then there are the quotes, the verbal jewels that have outlasted even his most contentious policies. Churchill's knack for the memorable phrase was almost supernatural. "Never let a good crisis go to waste," he might have said, had he been a modern-day spin doctor. Instead, he gave us gems like, "Success is stumbling from failure to failure with no loss of enthusiasm." It's the kind of line that makes you want to hang it on your wall, even as you wonder about the man who coined it. Churchill's legacy is as enduring as it is multifaceted. He wasn't just a leader, he was a storyteller, crafting narratives that have seeped into the collective consciousness. His speeches were more than just rhetoric. They were rallying cries that inspired nations. Yet, for every stirring sentence, there were the less palatable truths of his tenure, the economic missteps, the imperialist leanings, the strategic blunders. It's this duality that makes him an enduring subject of debate and fascination. In today's world, where leadership is often measured in tweets and sound bites, Churchill's life offers a blueprint for resilience and a cautionary tale of the complexities of power. His ability to inspire, even in the darkest of times, remains a powerful lesson in the art of leadership. Yet, his story also serves as a reminder that great leaders are often deeply flawed, their legacies a patchwork quilt of triumphs and tribulations. So, what can we learn from Churchill today? Perhaps it's the understanding that leadership is as much about navigating failures as it is about celebrating victories. It's about recognizing that resilience doesn't mean the absence of mistakes, but rather the courage to face them head-on. Churchill's life was a testament to the power of perseverance, showing that even in the face of monumental setbacks, one can rise, adapt, and ultimately leave a mark on history. As we close the book on Winston Churchill, it's clear that his story is far from a simple tale of heroism. It's a rich tapestry woven with the threads of ambition, controversy, and resilience. His legacy, both inspiring and contentious, continues to resonate, offering lessons for those willing to delve beyond the myth and into the complex reality of the man behind the legend. In the end, Churchill himself perhaps said it best: "History will be kind to me, for I intend to write it." And write it he did, with a flourish that ensures his place in the annals of history. Whether as a symbol of unyielding spirit or as a reminder of leadership's complexities, Churchill's story remains a testament to the enduring power of resilience, a tale that continues to captivate and challenge us in equal measure. Karl Marx wasn't born with a beard and a manifesto in hand, although it sometimes feels that way when you think about the impact he had on the world. Instead, he began his journey on May 5, 1818, in the quaint town of Trier, Germany, a place known more for its Roman ruins than for spawning revolutionary thinkers. Trier was a sleepy little town back then, with a population of just about 12,000 people. Hardly the bustling metropolis you'd expect to ignite a revolutionary spark. But young Karl was a different sort of fire starter, even if his early life was more about books than barricades. Now, if you were expecting Marx to have a Dickensian childhood full of hardship and toil, think again. His father, Heinrich Marx, was a lawyer, and his family was relatively well off, at least by the standards of the time. They lived in a comfortable home, and Karl received a solid education at the local high school, where he was probably more preoccupied with getting through Latin class than overthrowing the capitalist order. But hey, Even future philosophers have to survive their teenage years. Speaking of school, Marx wasn't exactly the model student. He had a knack for getting into trouble and was known for his unruly behavior. Think of him as that one kid who always had his hand up in class, not because he knew the answer, but because he had a question that would take the discussion off the rails. His teachers might have found him exasperating, but it was clear he was destined for something more than a life of legal briefs and courtroom drama, much to his father's chagrin. In 1835, Marx enrolled at the University of Bern, ostensibly to study law, but let's be real, his interests lay elsewhere. He was more drawn to philosophy and literature, which, in the eyes of his family, was akin to getting a degree in underwater basket weaving. Not exactly a lucrative career path. Marx's time at Bern was marked by a healthy dose of student life chaos. He joined a drinking club, the Trier Tavern Club, because of course he did, and managed to rack up debts and even a few run-ins with the law. It's hard to picture the architect of communism being fined for noisy drunkenness. But there you have it. His parents, unimpressed by his academic performance and extracurricular choices, decided it was time for a change. So off he went to the University of Berlin in 1836, a city more suited to intellectual pursuits and less to barroom brawls. Berlin was the intellectual heart of Germany at the time, a place where ideas were traded like stocks on Wall Street. It was here that Marx's love affair with philosophy truly took off, much to his father's dismay. Heinrich was hoping for a lawyer, not a philosopher king. In Berlin, Marx came under the influence of the young Hegelians, a group of radical thinkers who were all about challenging the status quo. They found Hegel's philosophy a bit stodgy and were eager to rework it into something more revolutionary. Marx was hooked. He dove into philosophy with the zeal of a man who just discovered caffeine, spending long nights reading, writing, and debating. He was particularly taken with the idea of dialectics, the notion that history advances through conflict and contradiction. It was the intellectual equivalent of lighting a match in a room full of fireworks. But while Marx was busy contemplating the nature of human existence, the world outside was spiraling through its own set of contradictions. The early 19th century was a time of massive upheaval in Europe. The Industrial Revolution was in full swing, transforming economies and societies at breakneck speed. Factories were popping up like mushrooms after a rainstorm, and with them came a whole new class of downtrodden workers. The gap between the haves and the have-nots was widening, and Marx was taking notes. Economically, things were a bit of a mess. The Napoleonic Wars had left Europe reeling, and governments were struggling to manage debt and economic instability. In Germany, the political landscape was a patchwork of independent states, each with its own set of laws and taxes, a bureaucratic nightmare, if you will. The working class was growing, but their rights and conditions were abysmal. This was the world Marx was born into, a world ripe for change, or, as Marx would later argue, revolution. Marx's student days were winding down by 1841, but his penchant for controversy was just heating up. He completed his doctoral thesis, a dense exploration of Epicurean and Democritean philosophy, and submitted it to the University of Jena, which, by the way, was a more liberal institution than Berlin, and less likely to be scandalized by his radical ideas. He earned his doctorate, but finding a job in academia proved tricky. Universities were wary of his reputation as a firebrand, and he was left without a clear path forward. As Marx contemplated his next move, the old world was teetering on the brink of a new age. The seeds of socialism were being sown, and Marx was about to become one of its most important gardeners. His early life, full of philosophical musings and student misadventures, had set the stage for his transformation into the revolutionary thinker we know today. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. For now, imagine Marx, the beardless young philosopher with a head full of ideas, standing at the crossroads of history, ready to take on the world, even if the world wasn't quite ready for him yet. As Marx stood at the crossroads of history, teetering between obscurity and revolutionary notoriety, he made a geographical leap that would change the trajectory of his life. Paris. Ah, Paris. The city of lights, love, and in the 1840, a hotbed of radical thought. If you're picturing Marx sipping coffee at a quaint cafe, jotting down notes while existentialists philosophize around him, you've got the right idea. minus the beret. The streets of Paris were alive with chatter about socialism, and Marx, ever the intellectual sponge, soaked it all in. In 1843, Marx moved to Paris, ostensibly to take up a job with the Rheinische Zeitung, a German newspaper that had the audacity to publish radical content. But let's be honest, Paris was more than just a job opportunity. It was the epicenter of revolutionary thought. Here, Marx met the who's who of left-wing thinkers. There were discussions with Pierre-Joseph Proudhon, who famously declared, "Property is theft," a slogan that would have made any capitalist spit out their Bordeaux. And let's not forget socialism's version of speed dating, the salons. These gatherings were filled with fiery debates, the kind that could make a philosopher's pulse race faster than a guillotine blade. But the real game-changer was meeting Friedrich Engels, the man who would become Marx's intellectual soulmate and financial lifeline. Engels was the yin to Marx's yang, the peanut butter to his jelly, if you will. Born into a wealthy German industrialist family, Engels had the privilege of seeing the Industrial Revolution's gritty underbelly firsthand. While Marx was struggling to keep his head above financial waters, often relying on Engels to bail him out, Engels was living a life of relative comfort, even if it was tinged with the guilt of a capitalist upbringing. Their friendship was a bit like the Odd Couple, with Marx as the perpetually disheveled Oscar and Engels as the more polished Felix. Yet, they shared a passion for dissecting the capitalist system like a frog in a biology class. Despite their differences, the dynamic duo began to collaborate on a series of works that would eventually culminate in the Communist Manifesto. But that's jumping ahead. In Paris, they were just getting started, forming the backbone of what would become Marxist theory. Their correspondence during this time is a treasure trove of intellectual banter and the occasional misunderstanding. Engels once sent Marx a letter packed with economic data, only for Marx to misread the figures and launch into a diatribe about British imperialism. Engels, ever the patient friend, gently corrected him, proving that even the greatest minds can have an off day. Paris was also where Marx began formulating his ideas on class struggle. The city was a microcosm of inequality, with the opulent lifestyles of the bourgeoisie casting long shadows over the working class. The Industrial Revolution had turned factories into profit machines, but workers were little more than cogs in the wheel. Marx saw this with the clarity of a man who just had his glasses cleaned, and it spurred him to develop his theory of historical materialism. In Marx's view, history was a battleground of class struggles, with the proletariat destined to rise up and overthrow their capitalist oppressors. It was a narrative as gripping as any epic, with the working class cast as the unlikely heroes. However, all was not well in the City of Love. The French authorities, never fans of dissent, soon caught wind of Marx's activities. In a move that would make any bureaucrat proud, they ordered him to leave Paris in 1845. So Marx packed his bags, kissed the Seine goodbye, and headed to the next stop on his revolutionary tour, Brussels. Now, Brussels might not have the same romantic allure as Paris, but it was a strategic choice. Belgium had a relatively progressive government at the time, and it was a safe haven for political exiles. In Brussels, Marx continued his collaboration with Engels, and together they joined the Communist League, an international group of radicals committed to, you guessed it, communism. Their task, draft a manifesto that would encapsulate their revolutionary ideas. But let's not forget that, while Marx was busy writing what would become one of the most influential political documents in history, he was also juggling the demands of family life. Jenny, his devoted wife, was often left to manage their finances on a shoestring budget, while Marx lost himself in his work. The couple's economic struggles were a constant shadow, a reminder that even those who critique capitalism are not immune to its pressures. Back to the manifesto. With the kind of fervor usually reserved for last-minute term papers, Marx and Engels penned the Communist Manifesto in 1848. It was a call to arms, a rallying cry for the proletariat to unite against the bourgeoisie. The document's opening line, "A spectre is haunting Europe, the spectre of communism," set the tone for a revolutionary manifesto that would echo through the ages. Of course, not everyone was thrilled with this spectral metaphor. Critics viewed it as a harbinger of chaos, while supporters saw it as the dawn of a new era. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Brussels was more than just a riding retreat for Marx and Engels. It was a hub of intellectual exchange, with ideas flowing as freely as the beer. And while the two were committed to their work, they weren't above the occasional misadventure. Engels once convinced Marx to join him at a local tavern, where they engaged in a spirited debate with fellow radicals. The night ended with Marx losing his hat, a minor inconvenience that Engels later immortalized in a letter with the kind of dry humor that only true friends can appreciate. Their partnership was not without its challenges. Engels' financial support was crucial, and there were times when Marx felt the sting of relying on his friend's generosity. Yet, their intellectual synergy was undeniable. Together, they dissected the capitalist system with the precision of a surgeon wielding a scalpel. Their ideas were radical, but they were also grounded in the economic realities of the time. They saw capitalism as a system that thrived on inequality, and they were determined to expose its flaws. As the 1840s drew to a close, the political landscape of Europe was shifting. Revolutions were brewing, and the status quo was under threat. Marx and Engels were at the forefront of this ideological upheaval, their ideas resonating with a growing number of disillusioned workers. But the road ahead was fraught with challenges, and the duo would soon find themselves navigating turbulent waters. So, as we leave Marx and Engels in Brussels, it's clear that their journey is far from over. They've laid the groundwork for a new political philosophy, but the world is still a long way from embracing their vision. The spectre of communism may be haunting Europe, but it's not yet ready to take center stage. For now, Marx and Engels remain the architects of a revolution yet to come, their partnership a testament to the power of collaboration in the face of adversity. Stay tuned, because the story is just heating up. And so, with the Communist Manifesto, hot off the press in 1848, Marx and Engels found themselves at the center of a storm that would make today's political mudslinging look like a friendly game of Scrabble. Picture this. Europe was a simmering cauldron of discontent, with revolutions brewing faster than a part of French press coffee. The year 1848 was like a buffet of upheaval, featuring uprisings from France to Austria and everywhere in between. Monarchs were shaking in their gilded boots, and the proletariat was getting restless, finally. In this tumultuous backdrop, the Communist Manifesto was both a revelation and a bit of a dud. Sure, it was a groundbreaking document, but initially it was about as well received as a skunk at a garden party. The manifesto was published in London in February of 1848, and it didn't exactly fly off the shelves like a Dan Brown thriller. It took time for its ideas to seep into the collective consciousness, as most radical concepts do. Initially, it was printed in German for a niche audience of intellectuals and radical groups, not exactly a recipe for instant bestseller status. As for the document itself, let's just say it wasn't your average beach read. The manifesto was a fiery call to arms, urging the working class to rise up and seize control from the bourgeoisie. Its famous rallying cry, "Workers of the world unite," was as catchy as a pop song chorus, but the rest of it required a bit more intellectual elbow grease. The opening line, "A spectre is haunting Europe, the spectre of communism," was designed to grab attention, and it did, but not always in the way Marx and Engels intended. Critics saw it as a harbinger of chaos, while supporters viewed it as the dawn of a new era. The reality, it was a little of both. Despite the revolutionary fervor, the manifesto didn't immediately change the world. In fact, it was largely ignored amidst the chaos of 1848. The revolutions that swept across Europe that year were, by and large, driven by a desire for national unification and liberal reforms, rather than the communist ideals Marx championed. The working class wasn't quite ready to embrace the idea of a classless society just yet. Instead, they were more focused on immediate concerns like food shortages and oppressive working conditions. Practical matters that, understandably, took precedence over philosophical manifestos. Yet, the ideas contained within the manifesto were like seeds waiting for the right conditions to grow. And while the initial reception may have been lukewarm at best, the document's influence would continue to spread, slowly but surely, across Europe and beyond. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. At the time, Marx wasn't exactly basking in the glow of intellectual stardom. In fact, he was more likely to be found in the waiting rooms of train stations, ticket in hand, as he was shown the door from one country after another. You see, Marx had a knack for getting kicked out of places, a sort of political nomad, if you will. The revolutions of 1848 were both a blessing and a curse for him. While they provided fertile ground for his ideas, they also made him a target for governments eager to crack down on dissent. His time in Brussels was cut short when the Belgian authorities, ever vigilant, decided they'd had enough of his revolutionary rhetoric. So, with his bags packed, and not for the first time, Marx was expelled, making his way back to Paris. But wouldn't you know it, Paris wasn't particularly welcoming either. The French government, having just dealt with its own revolution, was in no mood to entertain a firebrand like Marx. So, in a somewhat predictable twist of fate, he was expelled yet again. By now, Marx's passport must have been stamped more times than a collector's edition of a travel guide. His next stop was Cologne, where he threw himself into journalism, editing the new Rhenish Zeitung with all the fervor of a man on a mission. His time in Cologne was short-lived, though. The Prussian authorities, not exactly famous for their patience, shut down the newspaper in 1849, and Marx found himself on the move once more. This time, he made his way to London, where he'd spend the rest of his life. If you're keeping count, that's 4 countries in just a few years. Quite the whirlwind tour of Europe, albeit under less than ideal circumstances. Now, while Marx was doing his best impression of a political ping-pong ball, the romantic image of him as a universally revered figure was starting to take a hit. In reality, his ideas were controversial, and not everyone was keen to roll out the red carpet for communism. Sure, there were pockets of support, but the broader reception was more of a skeptical eyebrow raise than enthusiastic applause. Marx was more of an intellectual outsider, challenging the status quo and ruffling feathers wherever he went. But don't let that fool you into thinking he was entirely isolated. Marx was part of a larger movement, a network of like-minded radicals who shared his vision of a better world. They may not have been the majority, but they were determined, and their influence was growing, albeit slowly. The Manifesto was a catalyst, a spark that would eventually ignite a much larger fire. It just needed time. Back in London, Marx found himself in a city that was both a refuge and a challenge. The British capital was a melting pot of ideas, a place where intellectuals and radicals alike could find a platform. But it was also a city with its own set of problems. Industrialization had transformed London into a sprawling metropolis, complete with slums, pollution, and a working class that was struggling just to get by. It was the perfect backdrop for Marx's continued exploration of capitalism's flaws. So, as Marx settled into his new home, he continued to write, to think, and to challenge the status quo. The world wasn't quite ready for his ideas yet, but that didn't deter him. He had a vision, and he was determined to see it through, even if it meant facing rejection and ridicule along the way. The path to revolution was never going to be easy, but Marx was nothing if not persistent. Stay tuned, because the story of Karl Marx is far from over. The seeds of his ideas have been planted, and they're about to take root in ways even he couldn't have imagined. But that's a tale for another day. For now, let's leave Marx in London, pen in hand, scribbling away as the spectre of communism continues to haunt Europe, one revolutionary pamphlet at a time. As Marx settled into London, it was clear that the city offered him a peculiar blend of opportunity and hardship. Here, he embarked on the Herculean task of dissecting capitalism in Das Kapital, a tome that would become the bedrock of Marxist economic theory. But let's not sugarcoat it. Marx's time in London was far from the glamorous life of a celebrated scholar. Picture the man hunched over a desk in the British Museum reading room, surrounded by mountains of books, while his home life was more chaotic than a Victorian soap opera. London in the mid-19th century was a city pulsating with the energy and grime of the Industrial Revolution. It was a place where factories belched smoke into an already smoggy sky, and the gap between the rich and the poor was as wide as the Thames. The city's population had ballooned to over 6 million by 1851, making it the largest city in the world. Yet for many, it was a harsh, unforgiving environment. Child labor, abysmal working conditions, and tenement housing were the norm. In short, it was a real-life Dickens novel, minus the comforting resolution. For Marx, the irony was almost too rich. Here he was, critiquing capital with the zeal of a man possessed, while struggling with financial instability that would make a modern-day freelancer nod in sympathy. His household was a whirlwind of activity, not least because of his boisterous brood of children. The Marx family lived in a cramped apartment in Soho, an area then known for its poverty rather than its trendy cafes. Rent was a constant struggle, and creditors loomed like vultures circling overhead. This was a man who understood the sting of economic hardship all too well. The household itself was a veritable zoo, complete with a revolving door of visitors, including Engels, who often provided much-needed financial support. It's said that Engels was the only reason Marx didn't end up pawning his pen for a loaf of bread. The Marx family finances were a patchwork of loans and handouts, often buoyed by Engels' generosity. It's a bit like the friend who always picks up the tab because they know you're one missed paycheck away from selling your furniture. Engels, bless him, played the role of both benefactor and confidant, a testament to their enduring partnership. Yet, amidst the chaos, Marx was crafting a critique of capitalism that would outlast the soot-stained pages of his own life. Das Kapital, published in 1867, was the result of years of meticulous research and writing. Now, this wasn't exactly bedtime reading. We're talking about a dense, multi-volume work that delves into the intricacies of economic theory with the enthusiasm of a train spotter recounting the history of steam engines. The book explores the mechanics of capital, labor, and the exploitation inherent in the industrial system. Marx dissected capitalism with the precision of a surgeon, laying bare its contradictions and inequalities. Despite its importance, Das Kapital was not an instant hit. In fact, it sold about as well as ice cream in a snowstorm. The first edition reportedly sold only 1,000 copies, and it took several years for its ideas to gain traction. It's safe to say that Marx wasn't exactly rolling in royalties. Yet, the book's influence grew over time, eventually becoming a cornerstone of socialist and communist thought. Marx's labor theory of value, his analysis of surplus value, and his critique of commodity fetishism were revolutionary. They provided a framework for understanding the economic forces that shaped society, even if the initial reception was lukewarm at best. While Das Kapital was a monumental intellectual achievement, Marx's personal life was a different story. His financial woes persisted, and his health began to decline. He suffered from chronic ailments, including liver problems and carbuncles. Yes, carbuncles, because poverty apparently wasn't enough. The stress of his financial situation took its toll, and at times, Marx found himself at the mercy of his creditors. It's said that Jenny, his devoted wife, once pawned her silverware to keep the family afloat. This was a family that knew the meaning of scraping by. The Marx household was a microcosm of the very struggles he wrote about. The children were often sick, and several died in infancy, a heartbreaking reminder of the precariousness of life in Victorian London. Yet, despite the hardships, Marx remained committed to his work. He was driven by a belief in the transformative power of ideas, even if his own life was a testament to the harsh realities of the system he critiqued. The Industrial Revolution, with its rapid technological advancements and societal upheaval, provided the perfect backdrop for Marx's theories. It was a time of great change, but also great inequality. The rise of factories and mechanized labor transformed economies and societies, but it also entrenched class divisions. The working class, or proletariat, was subjected to long hours, low wages, and unsafe conditions. Marx saw this exploitation as the inevitable result of capitalism's relentless pursuit of profit. His vision of a classless society was a direct response to the injustices he witnessed. Of course, not everyone was on board with Marx's ideas. Critics accused him of being an idealist, a dreamer whose vision of a classless utopia was naive at best. They argued that his theories were unworkable in practice, and that his critique of capitalism failed to account for its potential to adapt and reform. Yet, Marx's analysis of capitalism's contradictions resonated with those who felt the sting of economic inequality. His ideas offered a glimmer of hope for a more just and equitable world. Despite the setbacks and struggles, Marx's work continued to gain influence. His theories provided a framework for understanding the economic and social forces that shape our world. and they continue to be relevant today. Whether you see him as a visionary or a misguided idealist, there's no denying the impact of his ideas. Marx's legacy is a testament to the power of ideas to challenge the status quo and inspire change. As we leave Marx in London, it's clear that his story is far from over. His ideas have taken root, and their influence is growing, even as he grapples with the harsh realities of life. The spectre of communism may have started as a whisper, but it's becoming a roar, one that will echo through the pages of history. But that's a tale for another time. For now, let's leave Marx amidst the clutter of his Soho apartment, pen in hand, as he continues to challenge the economic order with the tenacity of a man who refuses to be silenced. Stay tuned, because the story is just getting started. And so, with Marx hunkered down in his cramped London digs, scribbling away like a man possessed, let's take a brisk stroll down the timeline to see just how his ideas went from the pages of Das Kapital to the front lines of 20th century political upheaval. Marx may have shuffled off this moral coil in 1883, but his ideas were just getting warmed up. It's like the ultimate posthumous comeback, except instead of chart-topping singles, Marx was cranking out revolutions, albeit vicariously. Now, if you were expecting a seamless transition from theory to practice, think again. The 20th century was a veritable playground of Marxist interpretations, each more creative and occasionally more misguided than the last. It's as if every revolutionary leader read the Communist Manifesto and played a game of ideological telephone, adding their own spin until Marx's original vision was almost unrecognizable. Take Lenin, for instance. The man took Marx's blueprints for a classless society and decided to fast-track the revolution in Russia, a country where the proletariat was still more of an idea than a reality. With the Bolshevik Revolution in 1917, Lenin gave Marxist theory a crash course in Russian history, and the world got the Soviet Union as a result. But here's the kicker. Marx himself didn't exactly leave a step-by-step guide on how to implement communism. His work was more about critiquing capitalism than providing a playbook for utopian society. Lenin's interpretation was like trying to assemble IKEA furniture without the instructions. Sure, you'll end up with something, but it might not be what was pictured on the box. And yet, Lenin wasn't the only one playing fast and loose with Marxist theory. Mao Zedong decided to give it a whirl in China, adding his own brand of rural proletariat revolution to the mix. The result, a great leap forward that was, ironically, a giant step back for millions of Chinese peasants. Fast forward to the latter half of the 20th century, and Marxism had become a global phenomenon, albeit one with wildly varying implementations. Each regime that claimed Marxist roots seemed to reinterpret his ideas to fit their unique cultural and political landscapes. Cuba, Vietnam, North Korea, each offered their own remix of Marx's original tracks, often with results that bore more resemblance to authoritarian rule than a worker's paradise. It's like Marx was the original artist, and every subsequent leader was a DJ spinning their own version of the hit single, sometimes without bothering to read the liner notes. Yet, for all the deviations, Marx's critiques of capitalism found a receptive audience, even in places where his ideas weren't fully embraced. The Great Depression of the 1930s saw capitalist economies around the world teetering on the edge of collapse, and Marx's analysis of capitalism's cyclical crises suddenly seemed prescient, if not downright prophetic. Unemployment in the United States hit 25%, and breadlines became a grim reality for millions. It was a stark reminder of the vulnerabilities inherent in a system built on profit and competition. The post-war economic boom may have temporarily quieted the spectre of communism, but Marx's ideas continued to simmer beneath the surface, influencing political and economic thought in ways both subtle and overt. The 1960s and 70s saw a resurgence of Marxist theory, particularly among intellectuals and student movements. Protests against the Vietnam War, civil rights struggles, and a general dissatisfaction with the status quo led to a renewed interest in Marx's critique of capitalist society. It was a time when students could be found debating dialectics as passionately as they discussed the latest rock album, a testament to Marx's enduring appeal. But let's not get too starry-eyed. For all the romantic notions of Marxism, as a liberating force. The reality was often far more complex and, frankly, brutal. The 20th century saw countless regimes that waved the Marxist banner while engaging in repression, censorship, and economic policies that left their populations impoverished. The Soviet Union, for example, may have industrialized at breakneck speed, but it also became a sprawling bureaucracy where dissent was as welcome as a porcupine at a balloon party. The gulags, purges, and famines were stark reminders that the road to a classless society was paved with human suffering. And yet, the allure of Marx's ideas persisted. Even today, his critique of capitalism resonates in discussions about income inequality, labor rights, and the role of government in regulating markets. The 2008 financial crisis, which saw global markets tank faster than you can say, subprime mortgage, revived interest in Marx's analysis of capitalism's inherent contradictions. When Lehman Brothers collapsed, the world got a front-row seat to the kind of economic chaos Marx had warned about over a century earlier. Suddenly, phrases like too big to fail and bailout became part of everyday vocabulary, and people began to wonder if Marx might have been onto something after all. So, what is it about Marx's ideas that continue to captivate and confound us? Perhaps it's the way he articulated the tension between capital and labor, a struggle that remains relevant as automation, globalization, and income disparity reshape the economic landscape. Or maybe it's the tantalizing promise of a society where human needs take precedence over profit, a vision that, despite its flaws, still speaks to our desire for a more equitable world. But before we get too carried away by the romance of revolution, let's remember that Marx himself would likely have been the first to critique the ways his ideas had been implemented. He was, after all, a man who thrived on debate and dissent, not dogma. The myth of Marx as the architect of a utopian future is as much a product of our imagination as it is a reflection of his work. In reality, his legacy is a complex tapestry of theory and practice, idealism and reality, critique and creation. And so, as we wrap up our journey through the life and legacy of Karl Marx, let's take a moment to appreciate the enduring impact of his ideas. Whether you view him as a visionary thinker or a misguided idealist, there's no denying the influence he's had on the course of history. His critiques of capitalism continue to provoke debate and inspire movements, challenging us to reconsider the world we live in and the systems we take for granted. In the end, Marx's legacy is a testament to the power of ideas to shape the world, for better or worse. It's a reminder that the pursuit of a more just and equitable society is a journey, not a destination, a journey that's as fraught with challenges as it is with possibilities. As we bid farewell to our bearded philosopher, let's carry with us the knowledge that history is not a static narrative, but a dynamic and ever-evolving story. And who knows, maybe somewhere, in a dusty corner of a library or the crowded streets of a bustling city, someone is picking up a copy of Das Kapital and embarking on their own journey of discovery. After all, as Marx himself might have said, the spectre of communism may haunt Europe no longer, but its echoes still reverberate in the corridors of power and the conversations of everyday life. The air is thick with the scent of damp earth and the distant aroma of yesterday's embers as you peel your eyes open to the waking world of Tikal in the 5th century. Welcome to your morning in this Mayan metropolis, where the city hums with the promise of prosperity and the occasional whiff of cacao. With the sun just flirting with the horizon, it's already time to dive into the vibrant chaos of the marketplace. Because, let's face it, in Tikal, you snooze. You lose probably a prime spot for your stall and a few potential customers. Now, let's talk about Tikal itself. This isn't some quaint little village with cobblestone streets and charmingly cramped quarters. Oh no, Tikal is a beast of a city, a sprawling, pulsing heart of trade and culture. Picture this, a city with a population that might have hit the 100,000 mark at its peak. Think of it as the Manhattan of the Mayan world, minus the skyscrapers, but with just as many social climbers. As you make your way through the city, you're navigating a labyrinth of limestone structures that seem to defy gravity, reaching up to 230 feet into the sky. These aren't just piles of rocks. They're architectural marvels and status symbols, towering over the great plaza and casting long shadows over the bustling traders below. Every step you take echoes with the footsteps of countless others who have come to barter, beg, or boast. Your path leads you to the marketplace, the beating heart of Tikal's economy. It's here that the pulse of commerce quickens, where traders like you come to ply your wares. But this isn't just about selling stuff. It's a social spectacle, a gladiatorial arena of haggling, where the currency isn't just cacao beans, though they're definitely on the table, but also a complex mix of wit, charm, and raw nerve. And let's talk trade routes. Tikal sits smack dab in the middle of an intricate web of trade, a veritable spider's web stretching across the Mayan lowlands. This city is a key player in a network that extends from the Gulf of Mexico to the Pacific and up into the Yucatan. We're talking about a trade network that could rival the modern-day stock exchange in complexity, if not in Wi-Fi speed. As a trader, you know your commodities. You're not just dealing in trinkets and baubles. Oh no, you're handling the heavy hitters of the ancient economy. Cacao beans, the currency of the elite and the caffeine of the day. Jade, a stone so valuable it's like the gold standard of Mesoamerica. And let's not forget obsidian, the volcanic glass that's as sharp as your business acumen. These aren't just goods. They're symbols of power and prestige, the bling of the Mayan elite. You're not just here to sell, though. You're here to make connections, to weave yourself into the tapestry of Tikal's economic and social fabric. Every transaction is a dance, a delicate balance of supply and demand, of charm and cunning. Here, a well-placed smile can be worth more than a fistful of cacao beans. But hey, let's pause for a moment to debunk some myths. The romantic notion of a peaceful Mayan marketplace filled with smiling vendors and happy customers. Yeah, that's as real as a unicorn riding a rainbow. The truth is, the marketplace is a battleground, a cacophony of voices shouting over each other, each trying to outdo the other in a bid to make a sale. It's more Wall Street than Farmer's Market, a place where fortunes can be made and lost faster than you can say chocolate. So, what makes all this hustle and bustle worth it? It's the potential for upward mobility, the chance to carve out your own little empire in the shadow of Tikal's towering pyramids. Sure, the work is hard, the hours long, and the competition fierce. But the rewards, they're as sweet as the finest cacao. With the sun now firmly in the sky, the marketplace is in full swing. You're in your element, surrounded by the symphony of trade, the clink of jade, the rustle of textiles, the murmured negotiations over the price of obsidian. Every transaction is a story, a tiny chapter in the epic saga of Tikal's economic dominance. As you navigate this ancient economic hub, remember that you're not just a trader. You're a part of a grand tradition, a living link in the chain of history that stretches back through the centuries. In the bustling marketplace of Tikal, you're not just selling commodities. You're shaping the future of a civilization, one cacao bean at a time. As you weave through the bustling marketplace, the air electric with the pulse of commerce, let's zero in on the currency of the Mayan world, cacao beans. Yes, you heard right. These little nuggets of joy are more than just the building blocks of your favorite chocolate bar. In Tikal, they're the real deal, the coin of the realm, the OG Bitcoin, if you will. Each bean could buy you a tamale, and 100 might snag you a rabbit for dinner. But let's not kid ourselves. This isn't some idyllic barter utopia. The exchange rates can be as fickle as a cat on a hot tin roof. In this jungle economy, barter is the name of the game. Forget about coinage jingling in pockets. The Mayans weren't into metal currency. Instead, they traded goods based on perceived value. And trust me, the math could make your head spin faster than a top. A jade necklace might be worth 1,000 cacao beans today, but tomorrow, who knows? It's capitalism in its rawest form, where the worth of your goods is only as stable as the next trader's mood. Now, let's talk logistics. You didn't just wake up one day and decide to be a trader. Oh no, you trained for this. Moving goods through the dense, tangled jungles of Central America isn't for the faint of heart. We're talking about terrain so challenging, it makes urban gridlock look like a walk in the park. Distances covered could stretch anywhere from a few miles to hundreds, with trade routes running like lifelines through the landscape. And let's not forget the role of pack animals, or rather, the lack thereof. Unlike the domesticated beasts of burden in Eurasia, Mayan traders relied primarily on human porters. Imagine schlepping goods on your back over rugged terrain, sweating enough to fill a cenote. It was a job that required not just muscle, but a mental toughness, that could rival a Spartan warrior. Each step was a testament to human tenacity, and the lengths will go to make a buck or a bean. Speaking of beans, the cacao trade was a complex web of supply and demand that would make any Wall Street trader nod in approval. The value of these beans wasn't just in their utility as currency, but in their cultural significance. Drinking cacao was a social ritual, a sign of status and sophistication. It was the Mayan equivalent of sipping a fine wine, with a touch of caffeine for good measure. The elite would host lavish feasts where cacao flowed like rivers, each sip a testament to wealth and power. But before you start romanticizing the idea of a peaceful exchange of goods, let's bust a myth. The marketplace wasn't some harmonious gathering of smiling traders singing Cumbaya. It was a battlefield of wit and will, where every transaction was a strategic maneuver. The competition was fierce, and the stakes high. One wrong move, one miscalculation, and you could find yourself on the losing end of a deal, your dreams of prosperity dashed against the limestone backdrop of Tikal's grandeur. And this complex economy wasn't just about individual traders. It was deeply entwined with the political machinations of the time. The ruling class had a vested interest in maintaining these trade networks, as they were the lifeblood of the city's prosperity. Control the trade routes, and you control the flow of wealth. It was a game of thrones played out in the jungle, with cacao beans as the currency of power. But let's not get too cynical. There's a reason these myths of peaceful trade persist. They speak to our romantic notions of a simpler time, where human interaction was the primary currency. It's this duality, the allure of the legend versus the grit of reality, that makes the story of Mayan trade so compelling. We crave the romance of the unknown, while reveling in the gritty truths that underpin it. So, as you stand in the shadow of Tikal's towering pyramids, remember that each transaction, each being traded, is a thread in the rich tapestry of history. You're not just moving commodities, you're part of a grand narrative, one that speaks to the resilience and ingenuity of humanity. The marketplace is more than a place of commerce. It's a melting pot of culture, a crucible of civilization where the past and future collide in a dance as intricate as the Mayan calendar itself. As the sun inches toward its zenith, casting long shadows over the bustling throngs, you're reminded that within this cacophony lies the heartbeat of a civilization. It's a world where every bean, every negotiation, is a story waiting to be told, a testament to the indomitable spirit of the Mayan people, who, against all odds, carved out an empire in the heart of the jungle. But as the sun reaches its zenith, and the marketplace begins to resemble a slow-cooked tamale, it's time to step back from the trading frenzy and take a breather. Midday in Karl, the perfect opportunity for some shade, a sip of refreshing adol, and a little political gossip. Because let's be honest, what's a marketplace without a side of intrigue? You might be wondering, why would a trader like you need to keep up with the latest power plays in Karl's ruling elite? Well, in the Mayan world, trade and politics were like cacao and chilies, unexpectedly complementary and occasionally explosive. Knowing who's cozying up to whom in the royal court could mean the difference between a lucrative deal and watching your precious jade gather dust. Let's dive into the juicy details. Karl was no utopian society of equals, despite what some rose-tinted lenses might suggest. It was a complex web of hierarchies and allegiances, where power was as fluid as the chocolate drink that greased the wheels of political discourse. At the top sat the Ajor, or king, like a jaguar surveying its territory. But beneath him, the court was a buzzing hive of nobles, priests, and ambitious relatives, each with their own agendas and alliances. Think of it as a cutthroat game of chess, with humans as pawns and entire trade routes as the prize. And here's where you come in. As a trader, you're not just peddling goods, you're a conduit of information, a walking, talking WikiLeaks of the 5th century. Your network of contacts stretches far and wide, from the lowliest scribe to the most influential advisor. You hear whispers of alliances and rivalries, catch snippets of scandalous affairs, and even get the occasional tip-off about a power shift. This intel isn't just gossip. It's your competitive edge in a market that thrives on knowledge as much as cacao beans. But let's debunk another myth. This isn't some romanticized vision of a harmonious society where everyone knows their place and lives in blissful contentment. Nope, Tikal's social structure was as hierarchical as the pyramids it built. At the bottom were the commoners, the backbone of the city, who toiled away in the fields and workshops, their lives dictated by the whims of the elite. Their stories often go untold, overshadowed by the grandeur of kings and queens. In the middle sat the artisans and traders, people like you, who straddled the line between commoner and noble. Your success depended on your ability to navigate these social waters, to schmooze with the right people, and avoid stepping on the toes of those who could make your life difficult. And at the top, the nobility, a class as entrenched as the limestone beneath their feet. They were the policymakers, the trendsetters, and the power brokers, controlling the flow of resources and dictating the terms of trade. Yet, despite the rigid hierarchy, the allure of Tikal's society was its fluidity, the possibility, however slim, of climbing the social ladder. For traders, this meant that a particularly shrewd deal or a well-placed connection could elevate your status, transforming you from a humble merchant into a person of influence. It was the ultimate gamble, but the potential rewards were as tempting as a ripe fruit hanging just out of reach. Now, you might be tempted to think of this as some ancient form of capitalism, where the market dictated social mobility, and you'd be partially right. But unlike today's stock markets, where fortunes can change with the click of a mouse, Tikal's economy was tethered to the whims of nature and the caprices of its rulers. A single drought could devastate crops, sending shockwaves through the trade networks, while a new king could shift alliances, leaving you scrambling to reassess your business strategies. As you sip your Adol and listen to the latest rumors, it's clear that every piece of information is a potential game changer. The political landscape is always shifting, like the shadows cast by the towering temples. Each detail you glean is a piece of a larger puzzle, a step toward understanding the intricate dance of power that defines Tikal's elite. But let's not romanticize it too much. The reality is that this constant jockeying for position, this cutthroat competition, was as exhausting as it was exhilarating. For every trader who ascended the social ladder, there were countless others who remained trapped in the same cycle, their dreams of advancement stifled by a system that thrived on inequality. The Mayan world was no utopia, but rather a reflection of the complexities and contradictions of human nature, where ambition and avarice walked hand in hand. So, as you relax in the shade, the noise of the marketplace fading into the background, remember that you're not just a trader, you're a player in a grand game of strategy and survival. Each transaction, each nugget of gossip, is a move on a chessboard as vast and intricate as the jungle itself. And who knows, with a little luck and a lot of cunning, you might just find yourself on the winning side. As the sun begins its descent, casting a golden hue over the city, you prepare to return to the marketplace, armed with new insights and fresh determination. The day is far from over, and neither is the story of Tikal, a tale of ambition and intrigue, where every decision shapes the future of a civilization. As the afternoon sun casts a golden hue over the city, you shake off the midday lull and head back into the fray of Tikal's marketplace. The siesta is over, and it's time to dive once again into the swirling vortex of trade and culture that defines this ancient metropolis. But before you get too comfortable with the idea of commerce as mere buying and selling, let's peel back another layer of this complex society. Trade in Tikal isn't just an economic activity. It's a cultural tapestry, woven with threads of religion and ritual that add depth to every transaction. You see, in the Mayan world, some goods were more than mere commodities. They were imbued with spiritual significance. Take jade, for example. This wasn't just the bling of the Mayan elite. It was considered sacred, a symbol of life and death, used in religious ceremonies to appease the gods and honor the dead. Imagine trying to haggle over something that's not just valuable, but also divine. It's like bartering with a halo above your head. And speaking of divine transactions, cacao isn't just your run-of-the-mill currency. This stuff has a pedigree. It was used in religious ceremonies, offered to the gods as a drink worthy of the divine palate. Picture this: priests pouring liquid cacao as a libation, a sacred offering to the deities who kept the cosmos in balance. Cacao was the liquid gold of the Mayan world, a bridge between the earthly and the ethereal. Festivals, too, were a time when trade and culture danced a lively jig. These weren't your average street fairs. The Mayans knew how to throw a party, and trading seasons coincided with grand celebrations like the Kayatan ceremonies, marking the end of a 20-year cycle in the Mayan calendar. It was a time when the city would swell with visitors, drawn by the promise of both spiritual renewal and economic opportunity. The festivals were a heady mix of ritual and revelry, where traders could strike deals under the watchful eyes of the guards and the approving nods of the elite. But let's not romanticize this too much. For all the pomp and spirituality, the marketplace could also be a theater of conflict. Trade routes were the veins of the Mayan world, and controlling them was a matter of life and death, a game of risk played out on a grand scale. You didn't just wake up one day and decide to open a trade route like it was a lemonade stand. These were fiercely contested territories, often leading to skirmishes and hostile negotiations that could turn bloody faster than you can say obsidian dagger. Imagine trying to negotiate with a rival city-state over the control of a lucrative cacao route. It's less friendly chat over a cup of adol and more a standoff with diplomatic daggers drawn. These conflicts were the dark underbelly of trade, where alliances could shift as quickly as the jungle winds. They were a reminder that in the Mayan world, commerce wasn't just an economic activity. It was a high-stakes game of strategy, where the spoils went to the cunning and the ruthless. And let's talk about the unsung heroes of this trade network, the porters who lugged goods across the rugged terrain. These were the human engines of the economy, the carriers who bore the weight of the world on their backs. Without them, the wheels of trade would grind to a halt. They trekked hundreds of miles through the dense jungle, their endurance as legendary as the goods they carried. Their labor was the backbone of commerce, a testament to the grit and resilience required to keep this ancient economy humming. But as with all things, there's a myth to debunk here. The romantic image of the noble porter marching stoically through the jungle is just that, a myth. The reality was grittier, the conditions harsher. Porters were often seen as expendable, their lives a precarious balance between economic necessity and physical endurance. It was a role fraught with danger, where the jungle itself could be as much an enemy as the rival traders waiting at the end of the route. So, as you navigate the marketplace, remember that each transaction is more than just an exchange of goods. It's a snapshot of a culture that thrived on complexity, where commerce was intertwined with the spiritual and the strategic. Every deal you broker, every jade bead you trade, is a thread in the intricate web of Mayan society. It's a reminder that trade in Karl wasn't just about wealth. It was about weaving yourself into the fabric of a civilization, one cacao bean at a time. As the day draws to a close, the marketplace begins to quiet, the frenetic energy giving way to the gentle hum of evening. The shadows grow long, and the air cools, a respite from the day's relentless heat. But the stories of trade and culture, of conflict and cooperation, continue to resonate, echoing through the limestone corridors of this ancient city. And so, with the sun dipping below the horizon, you pack up your wares, each item a testament to the rich tapestry of life in Karl. You've navigated the complexities of a world where commerce and culture collide, where every transaction is a dance, every negotiation a story. It's a world where the past and present intertwine, a civilization as intricate and enduring as the jungle that surrounds it. As you make your way home, the city alive with the soft glow of twilight, you carry with you the lessons of the day. Karl is more than just a marketplace. It's a testament to the resilience and ingenuity of the Mayan people, a civilization that thrived against the odds. And you, dear trader, are a vital part of this grand narrative, a living link in the chain of history that continues to shape the world around you. As the last rays of sunlight slip behind the horizon, you find yourself reflecting on the economic labyrinth and social jungle that is 5th century Karl. It's been a day where every step you've taken and every deal you've brokered has been a stitch in the grand tapestry of Mayan life. You've navigated a world where the line between trader and diplomat is as thin as a cacao bean's husk, and where every transaction carries the weight of cultural significance. The marketplace may be quiet now, but its echoes resonate with the stories of those who have come before you and those yet to unfold. Now, let's talk about those pyramids. The romantic image of the Mayans as serene astronomers, spending their days gazing at the stars and crafting intricate calendars. It's as appealing as it is misleading. Sure, they were celestial whizzes, mapping the heavens with a precision that would make even NASA blush. But these pyramids were more than astronomical observatories. They were the skyscrapers of Karl, towering testaments to power and prestige. They served as ceremonial centers, yes, but also as political statements carved in limestone. The kind of structures that shout, "We're not just here to stargaze, we're here to rule." And rule they did, under a social system that was as stratified as a triple-layered tamale. At the top of the heap, the Ajor wielded power both divine and temporal, making decisions that could ripple through the cosmos, or at least through the local cacao economy. The nobles beneath him jostled for influence, their alliances as changeable as the weather, while the commoners toiled below, their lives dictated by the whims of those above. It wasn't all feasts and festivals. It was a society where the hierarchy was as rigid as the stone it was built on. But let's not get too cynical without acknowledging the glimmers of hope in this rigid system. Because despite the layers of social strata, there was movement within the ranks. Traders, you included, had a shot at upward mobility, a chance to climb the social ladder, even if it was one jade bead at a time. It was a world where a particularly shrewd deal or a fortuitous alliance could catapult you from the dusty marketplace to the corridors of power. Sure, it was a long shot, but when the stakes are this high, even the slimmest odds can seem worth the gamble. Now let's tackle the myths head-on. The idea of a peaceful, egalitarian society where everyone knew their place and lived in harmony. It's a nice bedtime story, but the truth is a bit more jagged. The Mayan world was a patchwork of city-states, each vying for dominance. Warfare and conquest were just as much a part of the equation as trade and diplomacy. And while the pyramids might have stood tall as symbols of unity and religious devotion, they were also monuments to the Mayan penchant for political maneuvering. The truth is, beneath the veneer of ritual and reverence lay a society as competitive and cutthroat as any modern-day corporation. Yet, this complexity is exactly what makes the Mayan legacy so compelling. The traders of Karl were not just moving commodities. They were architects of a civilization's future. Their trade networks laid the groundwork for what would become one of the most sophisticated societies of the ancient world. They were the original globalists, connecting disparate cultures through exchange long before the term globalization was a twinkle in an economist's eye. Fast forward to today, and the echoes of Mayan trade are still felt. The concept of currency, the importance of trade routes, the intertwining of economy and politics, these threads run through the fabric of our modern world. And while we may no longer trade cacao beans as currency or haul jade across jungles, the foundational principles remain. The Mayan traders were the early adopters of a system that now underpins global economics, a system where information is as valuable as goods, and where the market can make or break fortunes in the blink of an eye. Their legacy is a testament to the enduring power of trade as a catalyst for cultural and economic development. The Mayans remind us that behind every transaction is a story, and behind every story is a person with hopes, ambitions, and dreams. They illuminate the path from past to present, showing us that while the players and commodities may change, the game remains much the same. In the end, the story of Karl's traders is more than just a historical footnote. It's a chronicle of human ingenuity and resilience. It's a reminder that civilizations rise and fall, but the spirit of enterprise endures. So as you close the chapter on this day in the life of a Mayan trader, take a moment to appreciate the legacy you've been a part of. The marketplace may close, but the story of trade and transformation continues, woven into the very fabric of history, as enduring and intricate as the stars that guide us through the night. Babylon wasn't just your average mud-brick metropolis. It was more like the Las Vegas of the ancient world, minus the neon lights, but with a surprisingly similar penchant for excess and laws. Nestled snugly along the Euphrates River, think of it as Babylon's very own liquid expressway, delivering everything from trade goods to the latest gossip. The city was perfectly poised to become a powerhouse of the ancient Near East. Now, if you're wondering why the Euphrates got a starring role in Babylon's rise, it's simple. Water is life, and in ancient times, it was also what separated thriving civilizations from those living in the historical equivalent of a basement apartment. Babylon, founded in what is now modern-day Iraq, really started flexing its muscles around 1894 BC. The time King Hammurabi came along in 1792 BC, the city wasn't just on the map, it was the map. Hammurabi, A king whose name sounds more like an exotic cocktail than a ruler was the sixth in line of the Amorite dynasty. He managed to expand his kingdom through a combination of military might and strategic alliances, which is a fancy way of saying he was really good at making friends, and then sometimes conquering them. Now, let's talk about the legendary Code of Hammurabi, one of the earliest and most complete written legal codes. Picture Hammurabi, not as some altruistic superhero in a toga, but as a savvy monarch who understood that a kingdom is only as strong as its laws. The code, inscribed on a stele that stands over 7 feet tall, a stone-cold masterpiece, if you will, was a bit like the Wikipedia of its time. It laid down 282 laws covering everything from trade and theft to family and labor disputes. It was meticulously detailed, down to the eye for an eye principles, which, let's be honest, would make for some pretty intense reality TV today. Hammurabi's laws weren't just about maintaining order. They were a reflection of the complex society he governed. Babylon was a bustling hub of culture and commerce, filled with traders, artisans, and more than a few folks who'd rather haggle than pay a fixed price. The laws were designed to keep this diverse population in check, which was no small task. For instance, if a house collapsed because of shoddy construction and killed the owner, the builder would be put to death. Talk about some serious quality control measures. Despite the romanticized image of Hammurabi as a wise and benevolent ruler, let's not kid ourselves. These laws were as much about power as they were about justice. Hammurabi knew that a unified legal code was the glue that could hold a sprawling, diverse empire together. It was about creating predictability in a world where life was anything but. The code was also a tool for projecting power, a way of saying, hey, I'm in charge here, and I've got the laws to prove it. It's tempting to view Hammurabi's code as a beacon of ancient wisdom, but scratch the surface, and you'll see it was as much about pragmatism as it was about principle. Sure, there were laws protecting the vulnerable, like widows and orphans, but there were also plenty of laws ensuring the king got his taxes on time. Hammurabi was nothing if not practical. His laws were a masterstroke of governance, ensuring that everyone, from the lowliest farmer to the wealthiest merchant, knew their place and their obligations. In the grand scheme of things, the Code of Hammurabi was a significant leap forward in the development of legal systems, and it set a precedent that would echo through the ages. It showed that a ruler could govern a vast empire not just with armies and tribute, but with the written word, a lesson that would be learned and relearned by countless civilizations to come. So next time you think of ancient Babylon, remember it as a place where laws were as monumental as the ziggurats that darted its skyline. A city where the flow of the Euphrates mirrored the flow of commerce and culture, and where a king named Hammurabi etched his name and his laws into the annals of history. And speaking of monumental laws, let's zoom in on the nitty-gritty of Hammurabi's code, the legal encyclopedia of ancient Babylon. This wasn't just about keeping the peace. It was the blueprint for daily life, dictating everything from business deals to bedtime stories. With 282 laws chiseled onto a towering stone stele, Hammurabi's code was like the ancient version of downloading the terms and conditions of civilization. Of course, unlike your typical online agreement, these laws were read and enforced by the king's officials, and you couldn't just scroll to the bottom and click accept. Now, let's talk specifics. Picture Babylonian merchants haggling in the bustling markets. Laws 104 to 107 had their backs. These covered the rules of engagement for merchants and agents, ensuring nobody got shortchanged unless they wanted to face the wrath of the legal system. The code was surprisingly thorough about commerce, a nod to the economic powerhouse Babylon had become. For example, if a merchant entrusted goods to an agent, and the agent tried to pull a fast one, Law 106 ensured justice, by demanding restitution that included not just the original goods, but interest or penalties on top. Sounds a bit like a lawsuit waiting to happen on Wall Street, doesn't it? But let's not sugarcoat it. Hammurabi's code wasn't exactly a bastion of equality. It was more like a legal seesaw, heavily tilted in favor of the social elite. Take Law 196, the infamous eye for an eye principle. It sounds fair, right? But hold on. This wasn't the egalitarian justice it's cracked up to be. The punishment often depended on the social status of the victim and the perpetrator. If a noble injured a commoner, the noble might just pay a fine. If roles were reversed, the punishment could be brutal. It's like a medieval version of do as I say, not as I do, where justice was blind, but only in one eye. Let's pivot to property rights, because nothing screams civilization like arguing over real estate. Babylonian society was keenly aware of land's value, and the code reflected this. Laws 42 to 48 dealt with fields, houses, and even irrigation canals, critical in a city reliant on the Euphrates. If a farmer neglected his irrigation responsibilities and ruined a neighbor's crops, he was on the hook for compensation. This was ancient accountability, folks, where even your water use could make or break your reputation. Hammurabi's laws also had a peculiar obsession with contracts. There were laws about marriage contracts, adoption agreements, and even rules for hiring oxen, because apparently renting a bovine was as complicated as leasing a car today. These contracts ensured everyone knew their rights and responsibilities, and they were enforced with the kind of rigor that would make a modern lawyer blush. Law 7, for instance, dealt with stolen property. If you bought something that turned out to be stolen, you had to return it to the original owner. And no, you couldn't just claim you found it on Craigslist. Of course, not all laws were about money and property. The code also delved into personal conduct. Law 53, for example, was all about public safety. If a house collapsed and killed the owner's son, the builder's son would be put to death. This might sound like a terrifying family business model, but it was meant to instill a high standard of workmanship. If only modern construction could guarantee that level of accountability. Meanwhile, Law 282 was the legal equivalent of the end credits, dealing with slaves and the consequences of their escape or rebellion. Harsh, yes, but it reveals the rigid social hierarchies that underpinned Babylonian life. Now, let's inject a bit of modern perspective. Fast forward to today, and you'll see echoes of Hammurabi's principles in legal systems worldwide. The idea that laws can create order from chaos remains a bedrock of civilization. However, the harshness of some of these laws raises questions about justice versus deterrence. Were these laws fair, or were they just a way to keep people in line? It's a debate that echoes through the corridors of time, from ancient Babylon to modern courtrooms. So, while Hammurabi's code may read like a stone tablet version of Judge Judy, it was a monumental stride in legal history. It wasn't perfect, far from it, but it laid the groundwork for the idea that laws could be codified, known, and applied. It's a reminder that, even in the ancient world, people were wrestling with the same fundamental questions about fairness, justice, and power that we grapple with today. And despite its age, the Code of Hammurabi continues to be a touchstone, a testament to the enduring quest for order in the human story. But don't get too comfortable. We've still got more Babylonian wisdom to unravel in the next chapter of this ancient saga. And speaking of unraveling Babylonian wisdom, let's dive into the bustling streets of ancient Babylon and peel back the layers of its social hierarchy. Imagine a tiered wedding cake, where each layer represents a different social class, from the cherry-topped kings to the crumb-covered slaves at the bottom. This wasn't some egalitarian utopia where everyone sang Kumbaya. Babylon was all about knowing your place and sticking to it. At the top sat the king, the grand Huber of Babylon, whose word was law, literally. Hammurabi and his successors ruled with a divine mandate, a celestial stamp of approval that made their laws seem like heavenly commandments. And let's be honest, having the gods on your side is a pretty sweet deal when you're laying down the law. Beneath the king were the nobles, the aristocratic elite who lived in fancy ziggurat-adjacent neighborhoods, sipping on ancient cocktails and enjoying the perks of a society that was, shall we say, a tad lopsided. But while the royals and nobles enjoyed the high life, the majority of Babylon's population was more concerned with mundane matters like survival. Enter the free men and women, the commoners who made up the backbone of Babylonian society. These were the farmers, artisans, and traders who kept the economy chugging along like a well-oiled chariot. They didn't have the luxury of lounging in palaces, but they did have the satisfaction of knowing that their hard work kept the city running. Then there were the slaves, who unfortunately had about as much freedom as a rock at the bottom of the Euphrates. Slavery in Babylon wasn't based on race. It was more of an equal opportunity oppressor. Debtors, prisoners of war, and those born into slavery all found themselves shackled to the whims of their masters. The Code of Hammurabi had a few things to say about their treatment, but let's not get too misty-eyed. These laws were more about protecting the owner's investment than championing human rights. Now, let's dig into the nitty-gritty of how the code reinforced this social order with all the subtlety of a sledgehammer. Take Law 198, for instance. It states that if a noble's daughter lost her life, the perpetrator's daughter would meet the same fate. It's like a twisted version of Trading Places, where nobody wins. This was the ancient Babylonian way of saying, mess with the upper crust, and you'll pay the price. Meanwhile, Law 199 spelled out a fine for the same crime against a commoner's daughter, because apparently not all lives were created equal. But Babylonian justice wasn't just about eye-for-an-eye retribution. It also involved some head-scratching penalties. If a builder's shoddy workmanship caused a house to collapse and kill the owner, the builder would be executed. In today's terms, imagine your contractor's life hanging in the balance every time you hired them for a home renovation. Talk about raising the stakes for a solid foundation. This law, while harsh, emphasized accountability with the kind of gravitas that would make OSHA proud. Turning to gender dynamics, Babylonian society was a mixed bag of progressive ideas and patriarchal practices. Women could own property, run businesses, and even initiate divorce, a level of autonomy that might seem surprisingly modern. Yet, before we start handing out feminist accolades, let's also note that women were often subject to the whims of their fathers and husbands. The legal protections they enjoyed were often contingent upon their relationship with the men in their lives, a stark reminder that equality was more of an aspiration than a reality. The myth of Babylonian gender equality is as romantic as a moonlit stroll along the Euphrates, but the reality was more complex. Laws like 128, which allowed a husband to divorce his wife for failing to bear children, highlight the pressures women faced. Sure, they could initiate divorce too, but the social and economic repercussions were daunting. It's like breaking free from a gilded cage, only to find yourself in a lion's den. These laws reveal a society that was progressive in some respects, while still firmly rooted in patriarchal tradition. Now, let's wrap our heads around the economic context that shaped these social dynamics. Babylon wasn't just a city of scholars and scribes. It was a bustling commercial hub where trade routes converged like ancient highways. The economy was a complex machine, with agriculture as its engine and trade as its fuel. The Euphrates might have been the lifeblood of the city, but it was the exchange of goods and ideas that made Babylon a cultural and economic powerhouse. In this commercial ecosystem, the Code of Hammurabi was the manual that kept everything running smoothly. It ensured transactions were fair, property was protected, and debts were settled. But fairness, as we've seen, was often in the eye of the beholder. With laws that weighed heavily in favor of the elite, Babylonian society was less about universal justice and more about maintaining the status quo. So, as we journey through the ancient streets of Babylon, remember that this was a city where the laws were as monumental as the ziggurats, where social order was meticulously crafted and fiercely defended. The Code of Hammurabi wasn't just a collection of rules. It was the blueprint for a civilization striving to balance power, order, and justice in a world where the gods held sway and humanity danced to their tune. But don't put your history books away just yet. There's still more to explore in this ancient saga. From the intricate web of trade networks to the cultural achievements that defined Babylon's golden age, our journey through the annals of history is far from over. Stay tuned as we continue to unravel the mysteries of this ancient empire, one stone tablet at a time. So, as we dig deeper into Babylon's legacy, let's move from the dusty streets of antiquity to the polished halls of Greek and Roman law. Picture this, a world where the echoes of Babylonian statutes reverberate through centuries, reshaping societies like a legal game of telephone. It's a bit like your favorite cover song being reinterpreted by a new band. Same tune, different vibe. Now, the Greeks, who gave us democracy, and let's be honest, a lot of philosophical navel-gazing, were no strangers to the concept of law as a societal pillar. They didn't just borrow Babylonian laws wholesale, but the influence is clearer than the Athenian sky. Take Draco, the Athenian lawmaker whose name sounds like a villain straight out of a fantasy novel. Around 621 BC, Draco introduced a legal code that was notoriously harsh, so much so that the term draconian still gives us shivers. While Draco's laws were more about severity than fairness, the concept of written laws, like those of Hammurabi, was a staple borrowed from Babylon's playbook. Let's not forget Sarlan, the Athenian statesman who took a chisel to Draco's stone-cold approach and softened it up a bit around 594 BC. Sarlan's reforms were all about balance, like a tightrope walker with a law degree. He focused on reducing the gap between the rich and the poor, echoing Hammurabi's attempts to create a more predictable social environment. Sure, Sarlan wasn't exactly distributing wealth like Robin Hood, but he was an early champion of debt relief and economic reform. It's fascinating to see how the ancient laws of Babylon indirectly inspired a system that laid the groundwork for Western legal thought. Fast forward a few centuries to Rome, the eternal city that borrowed more than just architectural inspiration from its predecessors. Roman law, particularly the 12 Tables, set around 450 BC, was the ancient world's answer to a legal FAQ. It was a codification effort that paralleled Babylon's stone tablets. The 12 Tables were all about transparency, ensuring that everyone knew the rules of the game. This was Rome's way of saying, we're not just winging it here, folks. Roman jurisconsults, the legal eagles of their day, were heavily influenced by Babylonian principles. Not directly, mind you. No Roman lawyer was flipping through a dusty copy of Hammurabi's code, but the influence was there in the air they breathed. The Romans valued written laws that applied to everyone, even as they tailored these laws to fit their own societal needs. It's like they were remixing Babylonian beats with a Roman twist, adding a bit of Latin flair to the ancient rhythms. Now, let's take a detour into modern times, where echoes of Babylonian law are still found in the most unexpected places. Take the concept of proportional punishment, the eye for an eye principle. Sure, the average courtroom doesn't dole out justice with quite the same literal flair, but the idea persists. Modern legal systems aim for proportionality, ensuring that penalties fit the crime. It's a legal concept that survived the centuries, like a historical hangover that never quite goes away. And here's a fun twist. The notion of accountability for shoddy workmanship, which Hammurabi enforced with life and death stakes, has evolved into our modern consumer protection laws. You can almost hear Hammurabi's ghost whispering through the fine print of your appliance warranty. So next time that toaster you bought goes on strike, remember that you're tapping into an ancient tradition of holding people accountable for their handiwork, minus the life-threatening consequences, of course. Think of it this way. Hammurabi's code was the original terms of service agreement, a binding social contract where everyone knew the score. It's not hard to imagine Hammurabi nodding approvingly at modern legal systems that strive for transparency and predictability, even if today's laws are enforced with less of a heavy hand. He'd probably chuckle at our penchant for lengthy legal documents, though. After all, his code was a model of brevity compared to the tomes lawyers churn out today. Speaking of modern connections, let's not forget pop culture's love affair with ancient law. From TV dramas that glorify courtroom battles to films that explore justice and morality, Babylonian principles are woven into the fabric of our narratives. It's like the ancient world's greatest hits album that keeps getting remastered for new audiences. On-screen lawyers might not be quoting Hammurabi verbatim, but the themes of justice, retribution, and social order are unmistakably present. Now, let's circle back to those Roman legal eagles. The Roman Empire, with its sprawling territories and diverse populations, needed a legal system that could transcend cultural differences, much like Babylon did in its heyday. The Romans succeeded by incorporating elements from conquered peoples into their legal framework, creating a mosaic of laws that allowed them to govern effectively. It's a page straight out of Hammurabi's book, where the law served as both a tool for control and a means of unification. But before we get swept away in the romance of ancient lawgivers, let's bust a few myths. The idea that Babylonian law was a beacon of justice is tempting, but scratch the surface, and you'll see it was as much about maintaining the status quo as it was about fairness. Hammurabi wasn't exactly a champion of equal rights. His code was more about preserving order in a chaotic world. It's a sobering reminder that ancient laws, while groundbreaking, often reflected the biases and inequalities of their time. Now, as we wrap up this leg of our journey, remember that Babylon's legal legacy is more than just dusty tablets and ancient edicts. It's a living tradition, a thread woven through the tapestry of human civilization. From the bustling marketplaces of Babylon to the sophisticated legal systems of today, the quest for order and justice remains a universal pursuit. But hold tight, our exploration of Babylon's influence is far from over. There's still more to uncover, from the cultural achievements that defined its golden age to the trade networks that connected it to the wider world. So stick around, because our journey through the annals of history is just heating up. As we continue our stroll through the corridors of history, let's pause to ponder why Babylon, with its extensive legal system, continues to captivate our imaginations. It's a bit like a blockbuster movie that keeps getting sequels. There's something about it that just won't quit. Perhaps it's the allure of a grand civilization that once stood as the epicenter of the ancient world, with Hammurabi's code as its legal magnum opus. But peel back the romantic veneer, and you'll uncover a narrative filled with a distinctly less glamorous reality, one that modern historians love to dissect with the precision of a forensic team. First, let's talk legacy. Babylonian law wasn't just about justice. It was a tool of power, a means to control an empire that was as sprawling as it was diverse. Imagine a ruler trying to maintain order across a landscape teeming with different languages, cultures, and economic interests. Hammurabi's code wasn't just about keeping peace. It was about keeping the king's grip on his empire as tight as a drum. But here's the kicker. This wasn't a one-size-fits-all legal system. The laws were tailored to the needs of the state, ensuring the king's coffers were filled and his subjects knew their place. It's the kind of pragmatic governance that would make Machiavelli nod in approval. The romanticized view of Babylon often glosses over its harsher truths. Yes, it was a city of immense wealth and cultural achievement, but it was also a place where the social hierarchy was as rigid as the bricks in its famed ziggurat. The Code of Hammurabi may have been carved in stone, but its application was far from egalitarian. The rich and powerful had the scales of justice tipped in their favor, while the lower classes bore the brunt of the law's harsher punishments. It's like the ancient precursor to the modern complaint that the rich get away with a slap on the wrist, while the poor get the book thrown at them. The economic context of Babylon sheds light on why these laws were so critical. The city was a commercial juggernaut, with the Euphrates serving as its trade superhighway. Goods from distant lands flowed into its markets, making Babylon a melting pot of cultures and ideas. But with great wealth came great responsibility, or rather, the need for laws to manage it. Hammurabi's code was the ancient world's version of a business manual, ensuring that trade was fair and that contracts were honored. It was about creating stability in a city where fortunes could be made or lost faster than you could, say, Mesopotamia. Now, let's debunk a few myths. The image of Hammurabi as a wise lawgiver is appealing, but it's not entirely accurate. He was as much a politician as he was a king, using his laws to consolidate power and cement his legacy. The code was less about benevolence and more about ensuring that his subjects toed the line. It's a bit like those motivational posters you see in offices. Nice to look at, but ultimately designed to keep you working. Hammurabi wasn't averse to using the law as a tool of statecraft, balancing the carrot of protection with the stick of punishment. While Babylon's legal system laid the groundwork for future civilizations, it's crucial to remember that history isn't just a tale of progress. The laws themselves were a reflection of a society grappling with issues that still resonate today: inequality, justice, and the balance of power. Modern historians revel in unearthing these gritty truths, challenging us to see the past not as a golden age lost to time, but as a complex tapestry woven with both triumph and tragedy. The fascination with Babylon endures precisely because it reflects the duality of human nature, the capacity for great achievement and profound injustice. It's the kind of story that keeps historians up at night, pondering how such an ancient civilization could be so advanced, yet so flawed. And perhaps that's the real legacy of Babylon, a reminder that history is not just a series of dates and events, but a mirror reflecting our own struggles and aspirations. As we wrap up our exploration of Babylon's legal legacy, let's appreciate the complexity of a civilization that was both a beacon of culture and a bastion of inequality. The Code of Hammurabi, for all its imperfections, represents a seminal moment in the development of law, a testament to the human desire for order amid chaos. It's a reminder that while the past may be a foreign country, its lessons are as relevant today as they were thousands of years ago. So the next time you find yourself pondering the mysteries of ancient Babylon, remember that its story is far from finished. It's an ongoing dialogue between the myth and the reality, inviting us to look beyond the surface and confront the complexities of our shared human journey. So, you find yourself smack dab in the middle of 10th century Constantinople, where the aroma of bustling trade and the clamor of diverse tongues fill the air like an over-ambitious street musician. Welcome to the Byzantine Empire's crown jewel, a city that's as much about its glittering mosaics as it is about its cutthroat politics. First stop, the Hagia Sophia, architectural marvel that looks like it was designed by an overachieving deity with a penchant for domes. Completed in 537 AD, this basilica-turned-mosque-turned-museum is an engineering wonder of its time. Imagine a dome that's 180 feet high, about the height of an 18-story building, hovering like a celestial pancake. It's like the Empire State Building of the medieval world, but with more incense and fewer tourists taking selfies. As you stroll through the colossal nave, you can almost hear Emperor Justinian himself whispering, "Salaman, I have outdone thee," a cheeky nod to the biblical king and his not-so-humble temple of Salaman. But it's not just about the bragging rights. The Hagia Sophia is a symbol of the empire's wealth and the Byzantine flair for turning grandeur into a political statement. It's a reminder that the Byzantines didn't just believe in divine right, they believed in divine real estate. Outside, the streets of Constantinople are a chaotic symphony of merchants hawking silk and spices while dodging the occasional donkey cart. The city is a bustling economic engine, powered by trade routes that connect Europe to Asia like a giant medieval motherboard. The Byzantine Empire is the Bill Gates of the medieval world, raking in cash from taxes and tariffs. We're talking about a hefty 10% tax on imports and exports, which means that every silk scarf and saffron thread contributes to the imperial piggy bank. And don't even get me started on the Silk Road. This trade network is the medieval equivalent of Amazon Prime, delivering everything from Chinese porcelain to Indian spices right to Constantinople's doorstep. The Byzantines are knee-deep in trade with everyone from the Vikings to the Arabs. It's like a game of Risk, except instead of plastic armies, you're moving crates of pepper and rolls of silk. But let's not romanticize it too much. It's not all silk and spices. There's also a fair bit of sewage and street chaos. Imagine a bustling marketplace where the risk of stepping in something unpleasant is only rivaled by the chance of getting pickpocketed by a nimble-fingered local. The city's vibrancy is matched only by its unpredictability. It's the kind of place where you can haggle over the price of olive oil 1 minute and then dodge a runaway goat the next. Speaking of unpredictability, let's talk taxes. The Byzantine tax system is a masterpiece of bureaucratic creativity. It's as if they hired a team of accountants and told them to make life as complicated as possible. Land taxes, head taxes, trade taxes, they've got it all. It's the medieval version of a subscription-based economy. You pay to play, and if you don't, well, the Byzantine army has ways of reminding you. Now, let's not forget the street life. Picture a scene where philosophers debate in public squares, while street performers juggle and jesters jest. Sure, it sounds idyllic, but it's also a bit of a circus. The Hippodrome is a prime example. A colossal stadium where chariot races are the medieval equivalent of Formula One, except with more horses and fewer safety regulations. The crowd is a raucous mix of fans, gamblers, and the occasional brawler, all seeking a piece of the adrenaline pie. It's like a medieval NASCAR event where the stakes are high and the crashes are spectacular. But don't be fooled by the circus-like atmosphere. Beneath the surface lies a city that's a geopolitical powerhouse. Constantinople is strategically perched between the Black Sea and the Aegean, making it the ultimate toll booth for trade routes. It's a position that brings both wealth and envy, as every wannabe conqueror with a sword and a dream eyes it like a kid eyeing a candy store. And who better to guide you through this vibrant tapestry than a Byzantine historian? Meet your new friend, a scholar with a penchant for chronicling the empire's ups and downs. This historian isn't just here to show you the sights. They're here to peel back the layers of myth and reveal the gritty reality beneath. You'll hear tales of emperors who were more backstabby than benevolent, and policies that were about as popular as a tax audit. As you wander through the streets with your historian buddy, you'll get the lowdown on everything from the empire's Byzantine bureaucracy to its Byzantine architecture. Because if there's one thing this empire loves, it's Byzantine stuff. You'll hear about how laws were written, rewritten, and sometimes ignored altogether. You'll learn about the Varangian Guard, those fierce Viking mercenaries who served as the emperor's personal bodyguards and were probably the only people in the city who could outdrink a Byzantine soldier. So, buckle up, or rather, cinch your toga. You're about to spend a day with a 10th century Byzantine historian who will make you question everything you thought you knew about this glittering, gritty empire. And remember, in Constantinople, the line between legend and reality is as thin as a silk thread. As you meander through the lively streets of Constantinople with your historian friend, you soon find yourself standing at the gates of the imperial court. Ah, the Byzantine court, where titles are longer than the empress's shopping list, and ceremonial pomp is practically a competitive sport. Imagine a place where the job of master of the imperial wardrobe isn't just about keeping track of tunics, but is essentially a key player in the labyrinthine hierarchy. It's a world where you can't throw a rock without hitting someone with a title like Proto-Secretes or Prepositus Sacri Cubiculi. And trust me, these titles sound way fancier than the actual job descriptions, which often involve more paperwork than power. Inside, the court is a dazzling spectacle of shimmering mosaics and golden icons that scream, look, but don't touch, unless you're wearing gloves. Protocol here is as intricate as a Byzantine mosaic, filled with ceremonies that could make a royal wedding look like a casual backyard barbecue. The Byzantines were so obsessed with elaborate rituals that they even had a manual, the De Ceremonies, to keep track of it all. Picture this, a 10th century instructional guide on how to bow, when to kneel, and exactly how many steps to take before you're allowed to speak. It's like the ultimate how-to guide for social climbing, minus the YouTube tutorials. But let's peel back that gilded facade, shall we? Behind the layers of silk and brocade, the Byzantine court is a hotbed of political intrigue, where alliances are as fickle as a cat's affection. Here, power is a slippery eel, constantly shifting and wriggling out of one's grasp. The emperor may sit on his gilded throne, but he's often just one dagger away from an impromptu retirement plan courtesy of a disgruntled noble. The real power, it often lies with those behind the scenes, the eunuchs, the advisors, the ones who know every whisper and rumor that flutters through the court like a wayward moth. Now, let's talk about the Byzantine economy, which is as complex as a Rubik's Cube submerged in molasses. The coin of the realm is the solidus, a gold coin that weighs in at around 5 grams. It's held its value for centuries, becoming the medieval equivalent of a gold standard. But by the 10th century, even this rock-solid currency faces the slippery slope of devaluation. Picture the Byzantine economy as a magnificent tapestry slowly unraveling at the edges, where inflation is the pesky moth nibbling away at the fabric. Taxes owe the taxes. The Byzantine tax system is like a bad sitcom rerun, complicated, tedious, and somehow still running. You've got your land tax, your head tax, your trade tax, and let's not forget the kapnikan, a hearth tax for the privilege of having a roof over your head. It's a fiscal jungle out there, where every citizen is both a contributor and a victim. The Byzantine government is like a relentless vacuum cleaner, sucking up every last coin until you're left wondering if you can pay your taxes in compliments instead. And while we're busting myths, let's tackle the romantic notion of the Byzantine economy as a well-oiled machine. Sure, it was better organized than its Western counterparts, but calling the Byzantine economy efficient is like calling a sloth athletic. This is a world where tax evasion is practically a national pastime, and where corrupt officials could rival even the most seasoned modern-day politicians. The tax collectors are infamous for their creative accounting. Think of them as the medieval version of a used car salesman, only with more Byzantine flair and a lot less charm. Still, despite its flaws, the Byzantine economy is a powerhouse, fueled by trade routes that stretch across continents like the tentacles of an octopus. The empire's strategic location makes it a bustling hub of commerce, where silks, spices, and precious metals flow like wine at a Dionysian festival. It's a place where merchants haggle over prices with the tenacity of a lawyer at a divorce settlement, and the sound of clinking coins is as common as the call of the muezzin echoing through the city. As you stroll through the court with your historian friend, taking in the sights and sounds of this grand empire, it becomes clear that the Byzantines were masters of spectacle, but also of survival. Their ability to adapt and thrive amidst chaos is nothing short of remarkable. They were pragmatic, opportunistic, and more than a little ruthless when the situation called for it. This is an empire that knew how to put on a show, but never lost sight of the gritty reality lurking beneath the surface. So as you soak up the atmosphere of this remarkable place, remember that behind every glittering facade lies a story of ambition, power, and survival. The Byzantine Empire may have been an enigma wrapped in a riddle, but it was also a vibrant, dynamic society that managed to thrive in an ever-changing world. And as your historian friend guides you through the intricacies of Byzantine life, you can't help but marvel at the complexity and resilience of this fascinating empire. Stay tuned, because there's plenty more to uncover in this kaleidoscope of history. As your historian friend continues to weave through the bustling tapestry of Constantinople, you find yourself entering the quieter realm of the scriptorium, a sanctuary for the literati of the Byzantine world. In here, monks and scholars hunch over wooden desks, their ink-stained fingers dancing across parchment like a medieval tick-tock trend. These are the intellectual heavyweights of the empire, the keepers of knowledge, and the original bibliophiles who could recite Homer before breakfast and debate Aristotle by lunch. Speaking of Aristotle, let's talk about the intellectual pursuits that have these scholars so enraptured. Sure, the Byzantines were all about the latest fashions in silk and spices, but in the world of the elite, it was the ancient Greek texts that were the real treasures. Plato and Aristotle were the OG influencers, their works copied and revered like gospel. The scriptorium is the Byzantine equivalent of a literary factory, churning out handwritten copies of the classics like an artisanal print shop. It's a place where every comma is counted, every word weighed, and where the wrong stroke of a quill could land you in a philosophical quagmire. But let's not kid ourselves. This scholarly pursuit is a luxury, not a necessity. While the elite are busy debating the metaphysics of the Republic, the average Byzantine is more preoccupied with the cost of bread. And let's face it, bread is serious business. We're talking about roughly 3 fals for a loaf, which might not sound like much today, but for a Byzantine laborer making between 8 to 12 fals a day, that's a significant chunk of change. It's enough to make anyone question whether Aristotle's musings on virtue ethics can actually fill a stomach. So, why this obsession with ancient texts? Well, for the Byzantine elite, demonstrating one's knowledge of Greek philosophy was akin to driving a luxury chariot or flaunting the latest in silk couture. It was a status symbol, a way to showcase one's cultural capital in a society where legacy and lineage mattered as much as wealth. But don't be fooled. While they might have been waxing poetic about Platonic ideals, many of these intellectuals were just as concerned with their own social standings as they were with the pursuit of wisdom. Now, let's take a moment to debunk the myth of universal literacy in this intellectual haven. Contrary to romanticized notions, the Byzantine Empire was not a utopia of literate citizens. In reality, literacy was a privilege reserved for the few. Estimates suggest that only about 10% of the population could actually read and write, and much of that was concentrated among the clergy, the aristocracy, and those lucky enough to have been born into families that valued education. For the everyday Byzantine, the alphabet was as foreign as a Nordic saga, and reading was a skill more mysterious than alchemy. Education, or the lack thereof, was a stark divider between the classes. While the wealthy sent their sons to be tutored in the classics, the rest of the population learned the kind of practical skills that didn't involve deciphering ancient Greek. Think of it as the difference between majoring in philosophy and going to trade school. Both valuable in their own right, but in the Byzantine world, one came with a bit more prestige and a lot less chance of getting your hands dirty. Despite this disparity, the scriptorium was the beating heart of Byzantine intellectual life. It was here that texts were meticulously copied, preserved, and sometimes even translated into Latin or other languages. This was the medieval internet, a repository of knowledge that connected the past and the future, albeit at the pace of a very slow modem. The labor was intense, the hours long, and the pay, well, let's just say no one was doing it for the money. But what about those who weren't part of this intellectual elite? Well, for them, life was a different kind of grind. While the scholars debated the finer points of rhetoric, the rest of the city was engaged in the business of survival. From bakers to blacksmiths, each played their part in the grand economic machine that was Constantinople. The city's markets thrummed with the energy of commerce, where the price of wheat or olive oil could make or break a family's fortunes. In the world of the common folk, education was less about Plato and more about practical arithmetic, how to make the numbers work at the end of the day. It was a world dictated by the rise and fall of commodity prices, where the cost of living could shift as unpredictably as the tides of the Bosphorus. This was the gritty reality of Byzantine life, a place where intellectual pursuits were a luxury few could afford. Yet, amid this disparity, there remained a sense of continuity, a shared cultural identity that bound the empire together. Whether through the grand rituals of the church or the vibrant celebrations of local festivals, the Byzantines found common ground in their traditions and beliefs. It was a society that, despite its divisions, managed to maintain a cohesive cultural narrative, a testament to the resilience and adaptability of its people. So, as you step out of the scriptorium, leaving behind the quiet hum of scholarly pursuit, you're reminded of the complex tapestry that is Byzantine society. It's a world where knowledge is power, but also a privilege, where the lofty ideals of philosophy coexist with the harsh realities of daily life. And as your historian friend guides you through the streets of Constantinople, you can't help but marvel at the intricate dance of intellect and industry that defines this remarkable empire. But hold on to your scrolls, because there's still much more to uncover in this labyrinth of history. Stay tuned for the next chapter in this Byzantine saga, as your historian friend leads you out of the intellectual cocoon of the scriptorium and onto the bustling streets. You're about to dive into the spiritual heart of Byzantine life, because nothing says Byzantine Empire quite like a Sunday service at the local church. It's time to swap the philosophical scrolls for some good old-fashioned incense and iconography. Arriving at a nearby church, which seems to be as much a social hub as a religious one, you're immediately struck by the vibrancy of the crowd. Men, women, and children from all walks of life gather here, their eyes turning toward the altar where a splendid iconostasis stands, a literal wall of icons, separating the divine from the mortal. These icons are the medieval equivalent of a Netflix series, capturing the imaginations and devotions of every Byzantine who gazes upon them. Now, let's talk about the Byzantine church service. This isn't your quick, one-hour Sunday morning affair. Oh no, this is an all-singing, all-chanting marathon that could easily last 3 hours, give or take a few hallelujahs. You see, for the Byzantines, church isn't just a spiritual obligation. It's an immersive experience, a spectacle of sight, sound, and smell. The air is thick with the aroma of burning incense, frankincense, and myrrh, because if it was good enough for baby Jesus, it's good enough for the Byzantines. This is a world where religion and state are as intertwined as a Byzantine knot. The emperor isn't just a political leader. He's God's representative on earth, wielding both the sword and the crozier. And if you think modern politicians have God complexes, wait until you hear about the Byzantine emperors. They didn't just claim divine right, they practically wore it like a fashion statement. Take Emperor Basil Roman II, for example, who reigned from 976 to 1025 AD. Known as the Bulgar Slayer, he wasn't exactly known for turning the other cheek. His military conquests were as much about expanding God's kingdom as they were about expanding his own. But let's not get too carried away with the emperor's halo. The relationship between church and state was a delicate dance, sometimes more of a tango than a waltz. Emperors often found themselves at odds with the patriarchs, the church's bigwigs who wielded considerable power themselves. And when they weren't busy excommunicating each other, these religious leaders were indulging in lifestyles that would make a Kardashian blush. Take Patriarch Theophylact, who held office from 933 to 956 AD. Known for his extravagant tastes, Theophylact allegedly kept a stable of horses more suited to a chariot race than a church procession. And let's not even mention the gourmet feasts. This patriarch was less about fasting and more about feasting, which begs the question, was it easier to find piety or pâté in the Byzantine church? This lavish living wasn't just a personal quirk, it was a status symbol. In a world where spiritual authority often translated into political clout, the grandeur of a religious leader's lifestyle was a reflection of their influence. These men of God could rival any noble in their displays of wealth, and sometimes their indulgences were as legendary as their sermons. It's a classic case of do as I say, not as I do, a phrase that could have been coined by a Byzantine bishop with a taste for fine wines. But let's debunk the myth that all Byzantine religious figures were living large. Many monks genuinely embraced asceticism, retreating to isolated monasteries, where they lived on a diet of bread and water that would make a dieting influencer proud. However, even among these ascetics, there were those who couldn't resist the allure of a cushy gig. Stories abound of monks who swapped their vows of poverty for the opulence of the imperial court, trading their simple robes for silks and satins. The church's influence wasn't just spiritual, it was also economic. The Byzantine church was one of the largest landowners in the empire, controlling vast estates and generating significant revenue. This wealth allowed the church to wield considerable power, often acting as a counterbalance to the emperor's authority. It was a complex relationship, a Byzantine seesaw where power shifted based on alliances, rivalries, and the occasional divine intervention. And speaking of divine interventions, let's talk about the icons. These weren't just religious images. They were believed to be windows to the divine, conduits through which the holy could intercede in worldly affairs. Icons were revered, kissed, and sometimes even credited with miraculous powers. The Byzantine iconoclasm, which raged from 726 to 787, and again from 814 to 842, was a hotly contested battle over the veneration of these images. This wasn't just a theological debate, it was a full-blown cultural war, with iconoclasts and iconodules clashing over the role of images in worship. Now, if you're wondering how this all plays out on the ground, picture this. A Byzantine citizen enters the church, lights streaming through stained glass, the choir chanting hymns that reverberate through the nave like an ancient Spotify playlist. They're enveloped in a sensory overload that transcends the mundane, lifting them towards the divine, or at least providing a brief escape from the daily grind of Byzantine life. As you exit the church, the service having filled your senses, and perhaps your soul, it's clear that religion in the Byzantine Empire was more than just a matter of faith. It was a cornerstone of society, shaping politics, culture, and even the economy. The line between sacred and secular was as blurred as a Byzantine mosaic, each piece a reflection of the complex interplay between divine aspiration and earthly reality. But don't hang up your historian's hat just yet. There's still much to explore in this Byzantine saga. From the power struggles within the church to the everyday lives of the faithful, the story of Byzantium is as intricate as its architecture and as enduring as its legacy. And who knows, maybe in the next chapter we'll uncover more about this enigmatic empire's fascinating dance between the earthly and the divine. So, keep your eyes peeled and your mind open. There's always more to learn in the captivating labyrinth of Byzantine history. As you stroll out of the church, the heady mix of incense and Byzantine hymns still tickling your senses, it's time to reflect on the legacy of this enigmatic empire. The Byzantine Empire, often seen as a bridge between the ancient and modern worlds, is like the greatest hits album of history, packed with influences that still resonate today. From the art that decorates our cathedrals to legal concepts that underpin modern law, Byzantium's fingerprints are everywhere. Let's kick things off with Byzantine art, which is as iconic as a Byzantine icon itself. The empire was a veritable art factory, churning out mosaics that make modern art look like finger paintings. These mosaics, crafted with thousands of tiny, colorful tesserae, were more than just pretty pictures. They were visual sermons, conveying complex theological messages in a time when literacy was a luxury. Picture Christ Pantocrator looming from a church dome. This wasn't just decoration. It was divine propaganda, a reminder of the celestial hierarchy and the emperor's place within it. And while modern art might have traded tesserae for pixels, The influence of Byzantine aesthetics is still visible in the way religious art uses symbolism to convey deeper meanings. Now, let's talk about Byzantine law, which was as intricate as a Byzantine knot and just as difficult to untangle. The empire's legal system, particularly the Corpus Juris Civilis, or body of civil law, compiled under Emperor Justinian in the 6th century, is the granddaddy of many modern legal codes. This comprehensive codification of Roman law was as revolutionary as the printing press, organizing centuries of legal thought into a coherent system. It's like the ultimate legal cheat sheet, covering everything from property rights to criminal law, and acting as a foundational text for many European legal systems. So, the next time you're stuck in a bureaucratic quagmire, you can thank, or blame, Byzantine legal brilliance. But let's not romanticize the Byzantine legacy without addressing some of the myths that have cloaked it in mystery. One of the most persistent legends is the idea of the Byzantines as decadent, effete intellectuals, sipping wine while Rome burned. In reality, they were more like the medieval Mac jivers, adapting and innovating to survive in a world that was as hostile as a Game of Thrones episode. Sure, they had their fair share of opulence, but they were also pragmatic to a fault, often prioritizing diplomacy and cunning over brute force. They were the ultimate survivors, outlasting their Western Roman cousins by a good millennium. And let's debunk the notion that the Byzantines were just a bunch of backstabbing courtiers in fancy robes. While palace intrigue was as common as spiced wine at a Byzantine banquet, the empire was also a crucible of innovation and resilience. The Byzantines were the original networkers, forging alliances and trade partnerships that would make LinkedIn blush. Their strategic location at the crossroads of Europe and Asia turned them into the medieval world's middlemen, facilitating the exchange of ideas, goods, and occasionally diseases. So, while they might have been embroiled in political machinations, they were also the glue that held the medieval world together. Speaking of myths, let's tackle the legendary fall of Constantinople in 1453, a tale that's often romanticized as the tragic end of an era. The reality was more complex, involving a cocktail of internal strife, economic decline, and a relentless Ottoman army equipped with cutting-edge cannons. This wasn't just a case of the last emperor heroically facing his doom. It was a slow burn of political and economic factors that finally ignited in a dramatic finale. The fall of Constantinople was less about a single heroic stand and more about the inevitable result of centuries of systemic decay. So, what does this all mean for us today? Well, the Byzantine Empire isn't just a relic of the past. It's a reminder of the power of adaptation and resilience. In an era where empires rose and fell like dominoes, the Byzantines managed to keep their show running for over 1,000 years. They were masters of reinvention, constantly evolving in response to new challenges. And while they may not have always been the most benevolent rulers, their legacy is a testament to the enduring influence of culture, law, and art. As you wrap up your day with your Byzantine historian buddy, you're left with a newfound appreciation for this complex, multifaceted empire. The Byzantine world was a kaleidoscope of contradictions, a place where grandeur and grit coexisted, where the divine rubbed shoulders with the pragmatic. It was a society that left an indelible mark on history, one that continues to echo in our art, our legal systems, and our understanding of what it means to adapt and endure. So, next time you find yourself marveling at a glittering mosaic or navigating a tangled web of legal jargon, take a moment to tip your hat to the Byzantines. They were more than just a faded empire. They were pioneers, innovators, and survivors who managed to carve out a legacy that still resonates today. And as you drift off to sleep, let the tales of Byzantium's resilience and complexity weave their way into your dreams, a reminder that even in the most Byzantine of times, there's a path forward. As the first rays of the sun sneak over the horizon, you find yourself in the thick of Maasai warriors' day preparations in 18th century Kenya. It's early, but the village is already buzzing with an energy that makes your morning coffee look like a toddler's nap. The air is filled with the sounds of cattle lowing, women singing, and the rhythmic thump of feet on earth, all underscoring a day that's as much about heritage as it is about survival. Now, before we dive into the nitty-gritty of the day, let's hit pause and zoom out a bit. The Maasai are a Nilotic ethnic group, and their social structure is like a finely tuned orchestra where everyone has a part to play. It's not just about the warriors who get all the Hollywood glory, but a complex hierarchy that keeps the gears of Maasai life turning. At the top of this social pyramid are the elders. These guys are the wise old owls who have seen it all and have the stories to prove it. They're the ones making the big decisions and ensuring traditions aren't just a thing of the past. Next, you've got the warriors, or Morans, who are the rock stars of this society. They're young, they're fierce, and they're all about defending the community and herding cattle, which, let's be real, are the real stars here. We're talking about cows like they're made of gold, and for good reason. In Maasai culture, cattle are more than just walking hamburgers or milk machines. They're currency, status symbols, and livelihood all rolled into one. A man's wealth isn't measured by what's in his bank account, but by the size of his herd. An average herd can have anything from a couple of dozen to over 100 head of cattle. The bigger the herd, the bigger the status, which makes you think twice about complaining the next time you have to walk your dog. Women, on the other hand, have an entirely different but equally crucial role. They're the ones who build the homes, known as maniatas, and trust me, constructing these mud and dung masterpieces is no small feat. They're also responsible for milking the cows and taking care of the family. It's a life that's as demanding as it is essential, and while it might not have the same glamour as charging into battle with a spear, it's the backbone of the community. The Maasai economy is a fascinating beast. Imagine running a business where your stock market is a field and your shares move. With cattle as the primary form of wealth, the Maasai have a unique economic system that's both ancient and surprisingly resilient. In a world where most of us are trying to figure out the latest cryptocurrency, the Maasai have stuck with their tried and true method of wealth management. This isn't just a quaint tradition, though. It's a sophisticated system where cattle also represent social and political capital. They're used in negotiations, dowries, and even as peace offerings. Now, you might be thinking, sure, this all sounds great, but didn't these folks ever think about diversifying? Well, yes and no. While cattle are king, the Maasai are also involved in trade with neighboring tribes, swapping cattle and other goods for things they don't produce themselves, like grains. But let's face it, when your entire identity is wrapped up in cattle, you're not going to trade them for some quinoa. As you wander through the village this morning, you can't help but notice how everyone's role is interconnected. The warriors are out honing their skills. The women are bustling around with chores that seem never-ending, and the elders are there, guiding all these moving parts with the kind of stoic calm that can only come from a lifetime of experience. This isn't just a society, it's a well-oiled machine, and today is one of those days where you see every cog and wheel in action. So as you stand there, taking in the sights and sounds, remember, Maasai Warriors' Day isn't just about the battles or the bravado. It's a celebration of a community that knows its strengths, understands its weaknesses, and has thrived for centuries in one of the most challenging environments on Earth. And as the morning unfolds, you'll see exactly what makes this culture tick, one cattle bell at a time. As the sun climbs higher, burning away the morning haze, let's dive headfirst into the world of the Maasai warriors, or Morans, as they're proudly called. Imagine a lifestyle that's part boot camp, part fraternity, and part survival training. But before you let the romance of the noble warrior sweep you off your feet, let's put on our critical thinking hats and take a closer look. Becoming a Moran isn't a weekend seminar. It's a commitment that demands years of your life. We're talking about a training regimen that would make modern-day athletes reconsider their career choices. Starting around the age of 14, young Maasai boys are initiated into warriorhood through the *Unodo* ceremony, a rite steeped in tradition, but far from the sanitized pageantry we often see in movies. This isn't just about donning a colorful shuka and learning how to wield a spear. It's an intense process that involves physical endurance, mental fortitude, and a sprinkle of good old-fashioned bravado. One of the most grueling parts of this transformation is the circumcision ceremony, a test of pain tolerance and stoicism. No anesthetics, just raw courage and the expectation to remain unflinching. Flinch, and you risk being labeled unworthy. It's the kind of trial that separates the sheep from the lions, and for many, it's their first major step towards becoming a full-fledged Moran. Once initiated, these young men join an age set, a a social group that sticks together as they navigate the rocky path to adulthood. This age-set system isn't some quaint tribal custom. It's a well-oiled machine that organizes society and maintains order. Each set acts as a cohort that shares duties, responsibilities, and a unique bond that can't be easily broken. The age set is essentially a support system with a lifetime membership, and it's crucial for maintaining the social fabric of Maasai life. But let's not get too carried away with the romanticized image of the Maasai warrior charging into battle, spear in hand. While defending the community and raiding are part of the deal, the day-to-day duties of a Moran are often far less glamorous. Herding cattle, for instance, is a key responsibility. Picture the scene: a group of warriors standing tall and proud, but their gaze is often more focused on the rear end of a cow than the horizon. Not exactly the stuff of legends, but crucial nonetheless. Cattle raiding, though, that's where the adrenaline comes into play. This isn't just a reckless grab for more cows. It's a strategic maneuver deeply ingrained in Maasai culture. Raids serve multiple purposes. They're a way to increase wealth, demonstrate bravery, and even settle scores with rival tribes. That said, it's not all heroics and triumphs. The reality of raiding involves danger, injury, and sometimes loss of life. It's a stark reminder that the warrior lifestyle, while celebrated, is fraught with peril. Now, let's talk political dynamics, the real game of thrones, Maasai style. The warriors aren't just muscle, they're a political force. The Council of Elders may hold the wisdom, but the warriors hold the power to act. They're the enforcers, the boundary protectors, and sometimes the negotiators. It's a delicate balance of power, where the young and the old must collaborate to keep the community secure and harmonious. In terms of territory, the Maasai warriors were both defenders and expanders. Their prowess in battle and strategic acumen were pivotal in controlling and sometimes expanding their lands. But expansion wasn't just about grabbing more turf. It was about ensuring access to grazing lands and water sources, which are as valuable as gold in the arid landscapes of Kenya. So, where does the myth end and reality begin? The image of the noble warrior is undoubtedly captivating, but the truth is more complex. The life of a Maasai Moran is a tapestry woven with threads of hardship, duty, and undeniable resilience. It's a world where bravery is measured not just in battle, but in the quiet endurance of daily tasks that keep the community thriving. As the sun reaches its zenith, casting stark shadows across the savannah, you realize that the Maasai warrior's life is a mix of tradition, duty, and survival. It's not a romanticized adventure, but a gritty, challenging existence that demands respect and admiration. The stories of these warriors aren't just about the battles they fought, but the lives they lived, the communities they built, and the legacy they left behind. This is a culture that thrives on resilience and adaptation, and as you stand amidst the dust and the heat, you gain a newfound appreciation for the complexity and depth of the Maasai way of life. As the shadows lengthen and the sun perches directly overhead, you find yourself amidst a vibrant and bustling ceremonial gathering. Welcome to the heart of Maasai Warriors' Day, where tradition and spirituality intertwine in a dance as old as time. It's a scene that would make even the most jaded city dweller pause. The air is electric with anticipation, and even the cattle seem to sense that something momentous is afoot. But don't let the pageantry fool you. This isn't just a spectacle for the senses. It's a pivotal moment in a Maasai warrior's journey. At the center of today's gathering is the Enkipara ceremony, a rite of passage that marks the transition from boyhood to warriorhood. Picture this: a group of young men, their heads freshly shaven, standing nervously at the edge of tradition, ready to leap into the unknown. This isn't just your typical coming-of-age party with a cake and awkward speeches. It's a deeply spiritual rite laden with symbolic gestures, each more significant than the last. It's the Maasai equivalent of a graduation ceremony, but instead of caps and gowns, you've got spears and shukas. Ah, the shuka. Let's take a moment to appreciate this iconic garment. It's not just a splash of red against the earthy tones of the savannah. It's a statement. The vivid red shuka is more than a fashion choice. It's a symbol of the warrior spirit, a hue that represents bravery and blood. The Maasai believe that the color red scares away lions, and when you're living in a neighborhood where lions aren't just a metaphor for a bad day, that's a handy feature. So the next time you don't want to blend in at a party, think red shuka. Not exactly subtle, but definitely effective. But wait, there's more to the Maasai warrior's attire than just the shuka. Let's talk beadwork, those intricate designs that could make a modern jeweler weep with envy. Each piece of jewelry tells a story, a narrative of identity, social status, and personal history. The beads are not just decorative, they are communicative. Different colors and patterns convey messages about the wearer's age, marital status, and even specific achievements. It's like wearing your LinkedIn profile around your neck, but way cooler and far more ancient. Now, back to the Enkipara. This isn't just about darning some new threads and calling it a day. It's a spiritual odyssey. The ceremony involves blessings and instructions from the elders, who impart wisdom with the gravitas of a TED talk, minus the PowerPoint. Elders bless the young men, offering advice that blends practical survival tips with moral guidance. Think of it as a cross between a motivational speech and a survival guide. Don't forget to hydrate, meats, never show fear. All wrapped up in a cultural package that's been passed down through generations. As the ceremony unfolds, you can't help but notice the role of spiritual beliefs. The Maasai world is teeming with spirits and deities, with Enkai, the supreme god, at the top of the celestial hierarchy. Enkai is both nurturing and tempestuous, much like the weather in this part of the world. The Maasai believe that Enkai is the master of all cattle, which adds another layer of complexity to their already cattle-centric worldview. So when the warriors step into their new roles, it's not just a social transformation, it's a spiritual rebirth under the watchful eyes of Enkai. But before you get swept away by the romance of it all, let's sprinkle in a bit of reality. The life that awaits these young warriors is demanding. The ceremony might be steeped in symbolism, but it doesn't magically transform them into seasoned warriors overnight. There's no fairy godmother here, just a community that expects them to step up and deliver. The Enkipara is less about instant transformation and more about setting the stage for what comes next. A life of duty, endurance, and the occasional lion scare. As the midday sun blazes, the ceremony draws to a close, but the sense of anticipation lingers in the air. The young men, now officially Morans, step into their new roles with a mixture of pride and trepidation. It's a poignant reminder that while the allure of the warrior life is real, so too are its challenges. This is a culture where the line between myth and reality dances like the shadows on the savannah, each step forward grounded in tradition, yet constantly adapting to the harsh realities of life in the wild. So there you have it, a midday ritual that's as complex as it is captivating. As you watch the newly minted warriors integrate into the fabric of Maasai society, you begin to understand the depth of this cultural tapestry. The Maasai warrior isn't just a figure of legend. He's a living, breathing embodiment of a legacy that continues to evolve, one Enkipara ceremony at a time. And as the afternoon unfolds, you realize that this is just one chapter in a much larger story, a story that's far from over. As the Maasai warriors step into their new roles, the afternoon sun drifts lazily across the sky, casting long shadows that hint at the broader tapestry of Maasai life. This is a community where every bead, every step, and yes, every cow, tells a story of survival, adaptation, and let's face it, a sprinkle of drama worthy of any reality show. But hold on to your shukas, because now we're diving into the Maasai's wider world, where trade, alliances, and conflicts paint a vivid picture of 18th century East Africa's bustling economic landscape. First things first, let's smash that persistent myth of Maasai isolationism like an overripe tomato. Picture this, a network of trade routes crisscrossing the savannah, connecting the Maasai with neighboring communities. These weren't just paths worn into the earth by countless cattle hooves. They were the lifelines of commerce and communication. The Maasai, renowned for their cattle, weren't just herding these creatures for the sake of the morning view. Nope, these bovines were the original Bitcoin, liquid assets with a high move factor that could be traded for grains, beads, and those all-important metal goods like spears and knives. The Maasai economy was as diverse as a buffet, albeit one where cattle were the main course. But they weren't just trading livestock for the sake of variety. Oh no, it was a calculated move to ensure survival in a landscape that was as unpredictable as a cat on a hot tin roof. Grains, particularly millet and sorghum, were swapped with agricultural communities like the Kikuyu and the Kamba. These grains weren't just fillers for a hearty meal. They were essential for surviving lean times when the rains played hard to get. If you think the Maasai were just blindly bartering their way through life, think again. This was a society that understood the value of strategic alliances. Take the Kikuyu, for instance. While occasional cattle raids between these two communities were as common as spilled coffee on a Monday morning, they also engaged in peaceful exchanges. The Maasai traded cattle for Kikuyu grains, and in doing so, they forged bonds that were as much about diplomacy as they were about dinner. But wait, there's more to this economic dance. Enter the coastal Swahili traders, those savvy merchants who brought with them the allure of the Indian Ocean trade network. Picture them arriving with textiles, beads, and metal goods, items that were as coveted as the latest smartphone at a tech launch. In return, the Maasai offered cattle, ivory, and sometimes even slaves, a brutal reminder that not everything about the past fits neatly into a romantic narrative. If you're envisioning a peaceful marketplace with everyone holding hands and singing kumbaya, think again. The Maasai were no strangers to conflict, and their interactions with neighboring communities were often as tense as a high-stakes poker game. Raiding was more than just a rite of passage. It was an economic strategy. When resources were scarce and the grass didn't grow as green on their side, the Maasai warriors would venture into enemy territory, not just for the thrill of it, but to restock their herds. It was risky business, with skirmishes and battles that could turn a sunny afternoon into a scene straight out of an action movie. Now, let's not sugarcoat it. These raids were bloody affairs, with real stakes that involved life and limb, but they were also a testament to the Maasai's resilience and their understanding of the harsh realities of their environment. In a world where survival often hinged on who had the most cows, the Maasai were committed to playing the long game. As the afternoon wears on, you start to see the broader picture. The Maasai weren't just isolated cattle herders. They were active participants in a complex economic ecosystem. They navigated a landscape of trade and conflict with the same skill they wielded their spears, balancing tradition with the demands of a rapidly changing world. In the end, the Maasai experience was a blend of myth and reality, a story where the allure of the warrior was matched by the grit of daily life. It's a reminder that history is never as simple as it seems, and that behind every romantic legend lies a deeper narrative of struggle, adaptation, and resilience. As the sun begins its descent, and the shadows stretch across the land, you realize that this chapter of Maasai life is just a piece of a much larger mosaic, a story that continues to evolve, one trade at a time. As the golden hues of the African sunset paint the horizon, signaling the end of another day in the life of a Maasai warrior, it's time to kick back and reflect on what all this means, not just for them, but for us, here and now. We've explored the intricate world of the Maasai, with all its cattle-driven economics, warrior bravado, and bead-laden traditions. But what does their legacy look like under the harsh fluorescent lights of the modern world? First off, let's talk colonialism, a word that's as heavy as an overpacked suitcase, and just as messy. The late 19th and early 20th centuries saw European powers slicing up Africa like it was a pie at a family gathering, and Kenya was no exception. The Maasai, renowned for their warrior prowess, were not immune to the machinations of colonial expansion. Under British colonial rule, the Maasai endured land confiscations that would make your blood boil. We're talking about the 1904 and 1911 treaties, which effectively booted them off their fertile lands in the Central Highlands and pushed them into reserves that were as dry as a stand-up comedian's mouth at their first. About two-thirds of their territory was snatched away, leaving them with little more than the crumbs of their former domain. This wasn't just a case of finders-keepers, losers-weepers on a grand scale. It was a seismic shift in their way of life. The Maasai's pastoral lifestyle, deeply tied to the land, was upended. Their traditional migratory routes for cattle grazing were disrupted, leading to economic hardships that were as harsh as the Kenyan sun. Imagine being told your entire way of life is suddenly obsolete. It's like waking up to find out the internet's been deleted. Chaos, confusion, and a whole lot of anguish. Yet, in true Maasai fashion, they adapted. Forced to navigate the treacherous waters of colonial rule, they negotiated, resisted, and ultimately found ways to maintain their cultural identity. Fast forward to today, and you'll find Maasai communities straddling the line between tradition and modernity with the grace of a tightrope walker. They're involved in tourism, showcasing their culture to curious globetrotters who flock to Kenya like moths to a flame, eager to see the legendary warriors in action. But there's a twist. This isn't just a survival strategy. It's a savvy economic move. Tourism has become a significant source of income, with many Maasai working as guides in national parks or running cultural villages that offer a glimpse into their vibrant traditions. Now, let's tackle those romantic narratives that are as sticky as a summer popsicle. The image of the Maasai warrior, spear in hand, standing stoically against the backdrop of the vast savanna is undeniably alluring. It's an image that sells postcards and coffee table books, but it's also a simplification. The truth is, while the Maasai have a storied warrior tradition, their history is more than just battles and cattle raids. It's a tapestry woven with threads of resilience, adaptation, and innovation. They've taken the blows of colonialism, environmental challenges, and modern pressures, and yet they've managed to keep their cultural flame burning. Today, the Maasai continue to face challenges, from land rights issues to climate change. Their pastoral lifestyle, once so perfectly in sync with the rhythms of nature, is increasingly threatened by droughts and the encroachment of agricultural development. Yet, through it all, they've shown a remarkable ability to adapt, integrating modern education and healthcare into their communities while fiercely protecting their cultural heritage. So, as the last light fades, and the stars begin to twinkle like 1,000 tiny beacons in the night sky, what have we learned from a day in the life of a Maasai warrior? It's not just a story of spears and cattle. It's a story of survival against the odds, a testament to human adaptability, and a reminder that history is a living, breathing entity that shapes and is shaped by those who live it. The Maasai have danced with history, sometimes leading, sometimes following, but always with a rhythm that's uniquely their own. As you tuck into bed tonight, let this thought linger. The Maasai aren't just relics of a bygone era, frozen in time for our entertainment. They are a living testament to the power of cultural resilience, a people who have faced the storms of change and emerged, not unscathed, but unbowed. In a world constantly in flux, their story reminds us that the past isn't just a distant land we visit in books. It's the foundation upon which we build our future. And who knows? Maybe, just maybe, we can learn a thing or two from the Maasai about navigating the challenges of our modern world with a bit of grit and a whole lot of grace. In a world where social media influencers are practically deified, let's rewind to a time when the Aztecs took that concept literally, without the Wi-Fi. Nestled in the Valley of Mexico, the Aztecs carved out an empire that stretched its influence from the Gulf of Mexico to the Pacific Ocean by the early 16th century. These folks didn't just build pyramids, they constructed a civilization that was as complex and multi-layered as a modern-day soap opera. Now, if you're thinking the Aztecs were just a bunch of warriors with a penchant for sacrifice, well, you're only scratching the surface. Yes, they had a flair for the dramatic, but they were also agriculturists, architects, and traders with a knack for alliances, until they weren't. Their capital, Tenochtitlan, was a city so impressive that Hernan Cortés and his conquistadors were probably left wondering if they'd stumbled into some Mesoamerican version of Las Vegas, sans the neon. At the heart of this bustling metropolis was a religious system that would make even the most die-hard Game of Thrones fan say, "Whoa, too many characters." The Aztec pantheon was a bustling divine marketplace, with guards for everything from agriculture to war, each vying for attention like a lineup of A-list celebrities at a red carpet event. It's like trying to keep track of who's who in Hollywood, but with more feathers and less Photoshop. Take Huitzilopochtli, for example. This guy wasn't just any sun god. He was the patron of Tenochtitlan itself. In a myth that reads like a family drama, he was born fully armed and ready to take on his siblings. Talk about sibling rivalry on steroids. He was the driving force behind the Aztec conquests, demanding human hearts as a price for his solar energy. Considering he was also the god of war, it's safe to say his demands were met with a mix of awe and slight terror. Then there's Tlaloc, the rainmaker, and not in the metaphorical sense. This god had the power to decide whether your crops thrived or withered, and let's face it, in an agriculture-dependent society, that's the kind of influence that makes or breaks empires. His whims were as unpredictable as the weather itself, which is fitting, given his domain. Picture a meteorologist who could make it rain just by demanding a sacrifice. Talk about job security. But why did the Aztecs invest so much in these celestial figures? The answer lies in their worldview, a cosmic soap opera where gods, humans, and the natural world were all actors on the same stage. The Aztecs believed their gods needed nourishment to maintain balance in the universe, and what better way to ensure your crops grow and the sun rises than by offering a bit of human TLC, or in their case, a heart or two. Before you dismiss this as mere superstition, consider this. The Aztecs had agricultural techniques that would make modern agronomists nod in appreciation. They built chinempas, floating gardens, to maximize crop yields, showcasing their ingenuity and understanding of their environment. In a world without tractors or pesticides, the Aztecs turned swampy land into fertile ground, all under the watchful gaze of their gods. So, while their practices might seem extreme through our 21st century lens, they were deeply rooted in a practical need to survive and thrive in a challenging environment. The Aztec religious ceremonies were not just displays of devotion, but intricate performances that reinforced their social order, political alliances, and economic stability. It's a narrative that's more nuanced than a simple tale of blood and altars, a reminder that history is rarely black and white, but often a vivid tapestry with threads of both grandeur and grit. So, with the Aztecs, it wasn't just about keeping the gods placated, though that was certainly a top priority. But in the same way we check our horoscopes or binge-watch our favorite TV series for some semblance of cosmic order, the Aztecs had their own method of making sense of the chaos, the calendar. And let me tell you, this wasn't just your run-of-the-mill, hang-it-on-the-fridge type deal. Nope, the Aztec calendar was a head-spinning epic saga all on its own, as mind-boggling as any sci-fi series with time loops and parallel universes. The Aztecs rocked a dual calendar system that made planning anything more involved than a weekend barbecue look like a cakewalk. First up, the tonal Pohuali, the 260-day sacred calendar. This wasn't just some arbitrary length. It was intricately tied to their religious beliefs and rituals. Imagine trying to plan your life around a year that's shorter than the school year, but just long enough to make you question your sanity. Each day had its own deity, symbol, and number, kind of like assigning a different character and plot twist to each episode. It was the ultimate cosmic drama, with each day carrying a unique significance and potential for divine intervention. Then there was the Zu Pohuali, the 365-day solar calendar divided into 18 months of 20 days each, with a 5-day period at the end called Nemontemi. These 5 days were like the awkward season filler episodes, unlucky, unsettling, and best avoided if you could help it. The Aztecs took these days seriously, treating them with a mix of dread and caution, much like the last 5 minutes of a horror movie when you just know something's about to jump out. The real magic happened when these two calendars intersected every 52 years, creating a time of uncertainty and fear known as the New Fire Ceremony. Talk about a cliffhanger. The Aztecs believed that if they didn't perform the right rituals, the sun might not rise and the world could end. Imagine the pressure of making sure your annual fireworks display isn't just for fun, but actually keeps the universe from imploding. No pressure, right? But how did all this calendrical complexity translate into daily life? Well, the Aztecs had religious festivals scheduled with the precision of a Swiss watch, or at least as precise as you could get in a pre-GPS world. Each month was dedicated to specific gods and rituals, turning the calendar into a vibrant tapestry of celebrations that would put any modern festival lineup to shame. There was Tlaquetzalpualisli, a month dedicated to Zype Toda, the flayed god of agriculture, where warriors were sacrificed in gladiatorial-style combat. A bit more hardcore than your average Renaissance fair, I'd say. These festivals were the social glue of Aztec society, combining religion, community, and statecraft in a way that makes our modern-day office holiday parties look like casual coffee breaks. The festivals were meticulously planned events, complete with offerings, dances, and public ceremonies that reinforced social hierarchies and political alliances. It was like the Oscars, Thanksgiving, and a state dinner all rolled into one, with a touch more human sacrifice and a lot more feathered headdresses. And while the rituals might make your hair stand on end, they were grounded in economic and political realities. For instance, The festival of Penquetzalisli in December honored Huitzilopochtli with grand processions and offerings that reaffirmed the Aztecs' martial prowess and divine favor. This wasn't just about keeping the sun god happy. It was a statement of power and prosperity, a reminder to neighbors and enemies alike that the Aztecs were not to be trifled with. So, while it's easy to dismiss these ceremonies as barbaric or bizarre, they were a vital part of the Aztec strategy for survival and dominance. The calendar wasn't just a way to keep track of time. It was the backbone of their civilization, dictating everything from agriculture to warfare and ensuring that the cosmic order remained intact. Much like our obsession with timelines and schedules today, it was about finding order in chaos, ensuring that life wasn't just a series of random events, but a carefully orchestrated narrative with the gods as co-authors. In this whirlwind of celestial drama, the Aztecs managed to create a society that was as vibrant as it was complex. The calendar was not just a tool for marking time, but a canvas for their religious, social, and political aspirations. It was a story that unfolded day by day, year by year, pulling everyone into its intricate dance of prophecy and power. And as we'll see in the next chapter of this saga, the Aztecs took their roles in this cosmic play very seriously, ensuring that each performance was as unforgettable as the last. And speaking of unforgettable performances, let's dive into the economic and political backstage of the Aztec religious ceremonies. Trust me, these events were the Super Bowl, Oscars, and a Marvel movie premiere all rolled into one. But unlike the glitzy Hollywood events, these ceremonies came with a price tag that would make even the most extravagant film producer balk. First, let's talk about the temples. These weren't just stone structures plopped down in Tenochtitlan. They were the architectural equivalent of a Bentley in a world of horse-drawn carriages. The Templo Mayor, for instance, was the crown jewel, a towering testament to the Aztecs' devotion and architectural prowess. Its construction was no weekend DIY project. It involved hauling tons of stone across miles of challenging terrain, all without the luxury of modern machinery. Imagine the logistical nightmare of coordinating thousands of laborers, artisans, and engineers, all while maintaining a steady supply of food, water, and materials. It's like trying to build the Empire State Building with nothing but elbow grease and a really determined workforce. Maintaining these temples was no small feat either. They had to be in pristine condition for the countless ceremonies held throughout the year. This meant constant repairs, refurbishments, and the occasional expansion to keep the guards suitably impressed. The costs were astronomical, requiring a steady stream of tributes from conquered regions. Think of it as a subscription service, but instead of streaming the latest binge-worthy series, the Aztecs were ensuring divine favor and cosmic balance. Now, let's shift our gaze to the offerings themselves. These weren't your average fruit baskets or floral arrangements. The Aztecs believed in going big or going home, preferably not to the underworld. The offerings included everything from precious metals and stones to the more macabre human sacrifices. Each ceremony had its own set of requirements, with specific items and numbers meticulously outlined. It's like planning a wedding where every single detail, down to the type of incense used, mattered on a cosmic scale. And these weren't one-off events. They were recurring, like a monthly subscription that never quite cancels itself. The economic ripple effect of these ceremonies was colossal. To gather the resources needed, the Aztecs relied on a complex network of trade and tribute. Regions under their control were expected to contribute specific goods, from cacao and textiles to feathers and foodstuffs. This wasn't just a matter of collecting taxes. It was a demonstration of power and control, a reminder to everyone involved that the Aztecs were the alpha dogs in this Mesoamerican neighborhood. Now, you think that all this effort and expense were signs of pure religious devotion, but let's not kid ourselves. There was more at play than just piety. These ceremonies were also power plays, a chance for the priesthood and ruling class to flex their muscles. The priests, draped in elaborate costumes and adorned with symbols of their divine connection, were more than just spiritual guides. They were kingmakers, wielding influence that extended beyond the temple steps. In a society where divine favor could tip the scales between prosperity and disaster, the priesthood held the keys to the kingdom. Then there were the rulers, who used these ceremonies to consolidate their power and legitimize their rule. By aligning themselves with the gods, they reinforced their divine right to lead. It was a clever strategy, blending religion with politics in a way that ensured the support of both the gods and the people. Imagine a political campaign that ends not with a victory speech, but with a grand procession and sacrifices to ensure the sun rises the next day. It's a level of political theater that makes modern elections look like high school debates. But let's not forget the mythic allure of all this. The Aztecs spun a narrative where their rulers were chosen by the gods, making their conquests not just acts of expansion, but divine mandates. It was a story that captured the imagination and inspired loyalty, even as it masked the raw political machinations at work. It's the kind of myth that makes history textbooks and bedtime stories, a blend of romance and reality that keeps us guessing about what really drove the Aztecs to such extremes. So, as we peel back the layers of this historical onion, we find a civilization that was as much about strategy as it was about spirituality. The Aztec religious ceremonies were not just religious obligations, but masterclasses in political theater and economic management. They were grand productions, each one a testament to the power and ingenuity of a civilization that knew how to wield myth and reality with equal skill. And as we continue this journey through Aztec history, we'll see just how far they were willing to go to maintain their place in the cosmic order, one ceremony at a time. As we peel back the layers of this historical onion, we find a civilization that was as much about strategy as it was about spirituality. The Aztec religious ceremonies were not just religious obligations, but masterclasses in political theater and economic management. They were grand productions, each one a testament to the power and ingenuity of a civilization that knew how to wield myth and reality with equal skill. And as we continue this journey through Aztec history, we'll see just how far they were willing to go to maintain their place in the cosmic order, one ceremony at a time. All right, let's jump into the part of the Aztec saga that's both infamous and fascinating, the human sacrifices. Yes, folks, it's time to talk about the elephant in the room. The ritual practices that have fueled endless debates, sparked 1,000 myths, and left an indelible mark on the Aztec legacy. Let's unravel the gory details with a dash of gallows humor. First off, let's address the popular myth that the Aztecs were bloodthirsty fanatics who sacrificed people like they were giving out free concert tickets. While it's true that human sacrifice was a significant part of their religious practices, the reality is more nuanced. The Aztecs believed they were literally keeping the universe running. They thought their gods needed human blood, specifically human hearts, to maintain cosmic balance. It was less about senseless violence and more about celestial maintenance, like a grisly form of divine housekeeping. The numbers, though, could indeed be staggering. During the dedication of the Templo Mayor in 1487, sources claim that thousands of prisoners were sacrificed over 4 days. Some accounts, like those from the Spanish chronicler Diego Duran, suggest numbers as high as 80, 400. Now, before you start picturing an endless line of unfortunate souls, it's important to note that these figures are debated among historians. Regardless, even conservative estimates suggest a considerable scale, akin to an ancient assembly line, one with a very bloody end product. But why, you ask, did the Aztecs go to such extremes? The answer lies in their worldview, which was a cosmic drama where humans played a critical role. They believed their gods had sacrificed themselves to create the world, and human offerings were a way of repaying that divine debt. It's like owing the universe a favor and knowing you can't just Venmo it back. Take the sun god Huitzilopochtli, for example. He was the Aztec equivalent of a high-maintenance celebrity, demanding regular sacrifices to keep the sun rising. In a society reliant on agriculture, this was no small matter. The stakes were literally life and death. No sun, no crops, no civilization. It was a grim calculus that made human sacrifice seem a necessary evil. Now, let's debunk the idea that these sacrifices were just about religious fervor. They also served a very practical purpose, maintaining power and control. By sacrificing war captives, the Aztecs sent a message to their enemies and allies alike: cross us, and you might end up as an offering to the gods. It was a brutal form of psychological warfare, ensuring that the Aztecs remained at the top of the Mesoamerican food chain. And while we're busting myths, let's talk about the victims themselves. Contrary to popular belief, It wasn't just prisoners of war who met this fate. Some sacrificial victims were volunteers, individuals who believed they were destined for this honor. Imagine willingly signing up for a one-way ticket to the afterlife, convinced that your death was a noble contribution to cosmic stability. It's like taking one for the team on an interstellar scale. In terms of economic context, these rituals were also a way to redistribute wealth and power. The spoils of war, including captives for sacrifice, were shared among the nobility and priesthood, reinforcing alliances and social hierarchies. It was a macabre but effective method of ensuring that wealth circulated, albeit in a way that would make Wall Street traders wince. Primary sources, like the Florentine Codex compiled by Bernardino de Sahagun, provide a window into these practices. They describe how the victims were treated with great reverence before the sacrifice, dressed in elaborate costumes representing the gods they would soon join. It's a poignant reminder of the Aztecs' deep-seated belief in the afterlife, where death in this world was merely a passage to another. But let's not romanticize it too much. The reality was harsh, and the spectacle of sacrifice was as much about awe as it was about maintaining order. The ceremonial knives, often made of razor-sharp obsidian, were instruments of both fear and veneration. The priests who wielded them were the rock stars of their time, performing acts that were both sacred and terrifying. If you're wondering how this all played out in the grand theater of Aztec society, imagine a public event that combined religious fervor with political spectacle. The sacrifices were often held during major festivals, drawing crowds from all over the empire. It was part religious ceremony, part political rally, and part grim reminder of the cost of cosmic order. The scale and grandeur were unmatched, with processions, music, and dance setting the stage for the final act. It's a narrative that captures the imagination, blending myth and reality in a way that continues to intrigue us. While the romanticized view of noble sacrifice has its appeal, the harsh truth is that these practices were deeply entwined with the Aztec survival strategy. They were acts of devotion, yes, but also of dominance and control, ensuring that both the sun and their empire continued to rise. So, next time you hear about the Aztecs and their infamous sacrifices, remember there's more to the story than meets the eye. It's a tale of cosmic duty, political strategy, and human resilience, all woven into the rich tapestry of Aztec history. And as we explore the final chapter of this saga, we'll see how these practices fit into the broader narrative of a civilization at the height of its power, teetering on the edge of its own cataclysmic finale. And so we find the Aztecs at the height of their power, orchestrating elaborate ceremonies to keep the cosmos chugging along like a finely tuned Swiss watch. But just as they were getting comfortable in their feathered headdresses, enter stage left, the Spanish. Hernán Cortés and his merry band of conquistadors rolled into Tenochtitlan in 1519, equipped with steel, gunpowder, and a penchant for claiming new real estate. It was like a hostile corporate takeover, only with more swords and less legal paperwork. The Spanish conquest was a cultural collision of epic proportions. Imagine two parallel worlds crashing together, each convinced of its own superiority. The Aztecs saw themselves as the cosmic custodians, while the Spanish believed they were divinely ordained to spread Christianity, and not coincidentally, expand their empire. It was a classic case of my god can beat up your god, both sides equally certain of their celestial backing. Now, let's set the record straight. The fall of the Aztecs wasn't just about superior weaponry, though the Spanish did show up with some impressive tech for the time. Steel armor and cannons are a bit hard to beat when you're wielding obsidian blades, but the real game changer, disease, smallpox, that invisible invader, swept through the Aztec population faster than you can say viral outbreak. It decimated their numbers, turning a formidable empire into a vulnerable shell. As the Spanish established their foothold, the Aztec religious practices faced systematic suppression. The Spaniards weren't just interested in conquering lands, they aimed to conquer souls. They viewed the Aztec ceremonies as pagan abominations, and the Templo Mayor, once a bustling hub of religious life, was dismantled stone by stone. It was as if the Spanish were deleting the Aztecs' cultural hard drive, replacing it with their own version of spiritual software. The cultural clash was palpable. The Spanish priests saw their mission as a divine directive to save indigenous souls from eternal damnation, while the Aztecs struggled to comprehend a worldview that didn't require human hearts to fuel the sun. It's a bit like convincing someone their lifelong devotion to coffee is unnecessary because all they need is a battery-powered espresso machine. Sure, the machine is efficient, but where's the ritual, the flavor, the caffeine-induced existential crises? Yet, despite the Spanish efforts to erase the Aztec religious identity, not everything vanished into the colonial abyss. The Aztec calendar system, for example, left a lasting impression. Its echoes can be found in modern Mexican festivals like Dia de los Muertos, a vibrant celebration that fuses indigenous and Catholic traditions. It's a colorful reminder that history, much like a good salsa, is a blend of diverse ingredients. But let's not gloss over the darker realities. The Spanish conquest was brutal, a historical case studying cultural annihilation with a side of economic exploitation. The encomienda system that followed was essentially a rebranding of slavery, with indigenous peoples forced to labor under Spanish landowners. It's like someone taking over your house and charging you rent to live there. Not exactly the fairy tale ending the Aztecs might have envisioned. So, what's the takeaway from this historical roller coaster? Well, for one, it underscores the resilience of cultural identity. Despite centuries of colonial pressure, elements of Aztec tradition have survived and adapted, morphing into a rich tapestry that is modern Mexico. It's a testament to the human spirit's ability to endure, adapt, and thrive even in the face of overwhelming odds. In today's world, the legacy of the Aztecs continues to intrigue us. Their architectural feats, agricultural innovations, and yes, even their grisly sacrifices, remain subjects of fascination. They remind us that history is neither a simple story of heroes and villains, nor a predictable progression from primitive to advanced. It's a series of complex narratives, each with its own cast of characters, motivations, and outcomes. As we look back on the Aztec saga, we're reminded of the delicate balance between myth and reality. The Aztecs crafted a cosmology that was both captivating and terrifying, a world where gods walked among men, demanding tribute and respect. Today, we marvel at their ingenuity while acknowledging the harsh truths of their society. A society that, like ours, grappled with questions of power, belief, and survival. So, as you tuck yourself in tonight, consider this. History, much like those ancient Aztec ceremonies, is a performance. It's a dance between the stories we tell and the truths we uncover. And in that dance, we find the legacy of civilizations past, a reminder that while the players may change, the human story continues. Whether it's the rise and fall of empires or the persistence of cultural traditions, history is a never-ending narrative, one that invites us to learn, reflect, and above all, remember.